Let's get started. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Registered Nursing Board meeting. It is Wednesday, May 17th, 2023, and we will now take roll call to establish a quorum. My name is Dolores Trujillo. I am an RN appointed by the governor in the role of a direct care provider, and I am currently the president of the Board of Nursing. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I'm Mary Fagan. I am in the Nursing Services Administration role where I was appointed by Governor Newsom, and I am the board vice president.
Thank you. Elizabeth Woods.
Good morning, Elizabeth Woods. I was appointed by Governor Brown several years ago, and I heard this is my last meeting. And I wish I was prepared because I would have said something wonderful and nice. But all I can say right now is that it's been a pleasure being on the board, and I've enjoyed it all and worked with a bunch of wonderful people. Thank you.
Thank you, Betty. Jovita Dominguez.
Good morning. My name is Jovita Dominguez. I was appointed by Governor Newsom in the role of education.
Thank you, Jovita. Patricia Nguyen.
Hi, Tricia Nguyen, present. I was appointed by Governor Newsom as a public member.
Thank you. David Lawler.
Good morning. I'm David Lawler. I was also appointed by Governor Newsom in a public member role. Good to see you all.
Thank you, David. Vicki Granowitz.
I'm Vicki Granowitz. I was appointed by Tony Atkins, president of the California Senate, and I'm a public member.
Thank you, Vicki. Our board executive officer, Loretta Melby.
There we go. Got my video on. Thank you. I'm Loretta Melby, or Lori, and I'm the board's executive officer appointed by the board. Thank you.
Thank you. And our board counsel, Reza Pejuhesh.
Good morning, everyone. Reza Pejuhesh, attorney with the DCA Legal Affairs Division, and I'm the BRN Legal Counsel.
Thank you. We have now established a quorum for today's meeting. BRN moderator, will you please take us to general instructions for the format of a teleconference call and open to public comment for items not on the agenda?
Good morning. This is the BRN moderator. I will be moderating the meeting. To facilitate public comment, we will be utilizing the WebEx question and answer feature. When the board reaches a point in the agenda at which public comment is appropriate, the question and answer feature will be turned on, and members of the public will indicate that they would like to make a comment by inserting the phrase, "I would like to make a comment," in the question box, which is typically in the lower right of your screen. I will then call on the individual and unmute their microphone. The individual will have 2 minutes to make their comments. I will not give a warning as your time approaches. I will mute your microphone, and will announce that your time has exceeded the time allotted. I will then proceed to the next member of the public who has a comment. Please note that the question and answer feature is being used only as a means for members of the public to represent that they would like to make a verbal comment. When your turn comes, you will be prompted to unmute. If your question can be answered by the board, if your question can be answered, the board will respond accordingly. When making your comment, speak about anything you believe is important for the members to know. Remember, board members cannot address any item not on the agenda. Items not on the agenda at that moment, items that you would like to add to a future meeting, or items that will be discussed later on the agenda will be discussed at their correct times during the meeting. I will provide a brief reminder of this approach at the start of each public comment item. Finally, when board members or BRN staff are not speaking, I would like to remind them to mute their microphone. If I detect background noise during the meeting as a result of unmuted microphones, I will mute your microphone for you. Okay, and I'm sorry, we will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. Item 4.0, review and vote on whether to approve previous meeting minutes. I would like to make a motion to accept the meeting minutes from February 15th, 16th, 2023, March 16th, 2023, and April 20th, 2023. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. Betty.
Thank you, Betty. PRN moderator, can we open it up for public comment, please?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make, can indicate that they would like to make a comment. Oh my goodness, I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, I would like to make a comment. Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, I would like to make a comment. Sarah Pollock would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Sarah, I am not able to unmute you as you don't have a speaker or anything. Oh, sorry. Did you call? You must have called in. Hold on here. Let's see. Gotcha.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry. Thank you. Good job.
No, I'm I'm so sorry. So I initially wanted to comment on the previous subject of adding things to the minutes. I just was on dial-in, so I had no way to do the Q&A period portion. So I just wanted to bring to the agenda, if I have that 2 minutes, that so I'm currently a nurse in California, and I wanted to add to see if we're able to add that the requirement for relicensure, that we're able to do like a one-time education for human trafficking. So I'm with the Human Trafficking Coalition Board for Contra Costa County. I'm from Michigan, but I work in Northern California currently. And so I know Michigan has required, a couple other states do too. So I was trying to see if that's something we can get required for education in the legislature.
Can you repeat what the specific request was for education for licensure renewal? I was not able to catch that. I apologize.
Yeah, I had difficulty
No
also.
problem. Yeah, I apologize. So yeah, I was trying to find out if there's a way to put in for nurses for relicensure that you can add the requirement for the education being like human trafficking training, like as far as symptoms, signs, identification, things like that. And no, some states have had it required for relicensure. That is like a one-time education as part of their relicensure. And I really, since California is such a big state for human trafficking, I think it'd be really beneficial in the sense that most nurses, it's estimated that 50 to 80% that these patients, these human trafficking victims, will come in contact with a healthcare provider seeking care for their injuries. So yeah, I know other states have done it, so I was trying to see if California is able to do that, or that we're able to set up some license or some sort of something for legislation.
Thank you. That was clear. I appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan,
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods,
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez. Jovita Dominguez,
Yes, hello.
thank you. Patricia Nguyen,
Win, yes.
David Lawler,
David Lawler, yes.
and Vicky Granowitz.
Vicky Granowitz, yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to item 5.0. 5.1 is the Executive Officer Report, and Loretta Melby will be reporting out.
Thank you so much, Dolores. So it's been a busy session between the last board meeting and the last scheduled board meeting, regularly scheduled board meeting in February now. So I'll report out on some of the meetings that I've attended. I went to Seattle with our board president to the NCSBN mid-year meeting, where we learned about the compact artificial intelligence use with proctoring exams, and worked with some other executive officers on Operation Nightingale, met with the FBI with that as well, and I'll give further presentation on that information. So that was a very great meeting to be a part of. We also went with the nursing education consultants to Palm Springs to present with the COADN. They then traveled as well. Some of our NECs went to the LA area to go and work with, my throat. I have a really bad sore throat today, so I just want to apologize in advance. That's why you're hearing the gravelly and I'm swallowing a lot. So, but we'll make it through this. With CNSA, sorry, not CNSA, with CACN. We also met with the APRN Coalition, with CDPH, with CANP to discuss more on AB 890. I met with the Western Working Group on healthcare workforce shortages. I've met with several ledge staff and bill sponsors. I met with the California Nursing Association, with workforce training, with DCA. I did a presentation on Nurses Day at Providence Queen of the Valley. I have met with BVNPT as well as BPPE to discuss similar issues with nursing education and approval of schools. I've met with a couple directors of nursing with the NECs that are assigned one-on-one with them to discuss some school issues that have come up. I met with the UC chiefs to discuss the implementation of AB 890. I also met with public health in LA County to discuss the naloxone distribution and the use of standard, statewide standing order, and just multiple kind of everyday meetings, just kind of on process improvement. So those were the big ones of the meetings that we've had that I've sat in and participated with since the February board meeting. Additional updates is we did hire our supervising special investigator to replace a retirement that occurred late last year. And she officially started on Monday. Her name is Nicole, and she is being oriented right now with our assistant executive officer, Yvonne, who has covered in that position, essentially serving in a dual role since that retirement. So Yvonne was doing her job as assistant executive officer as well as covering for the supervising special investigator too over the investigations unit. So just wanted to say thank you to Yvonne for all that she's done to really assist with this. Couldn't have done it without her. We are in the process of hiring for our nursing education consultant in continuing education. There was a retirement in that position as well, a re-retirement. We had an RA in there since October. And then she decided to actual retire this time, but we are looking at another retired annuitant to come into that position. In the meantime, I am filling in that role as well so that we are able to continue the approval of the continuing education provider applications that come in. We are also looking at the hiring of a nursing education consultant within the enforcement unit. That nursing education consultant does all the job approvals of the nurses that are in the probation area, as well as assign courses, do job modification requests, and review and approve continuing education courses to help them meet the requirements of their probation. While we are waiting on a hire, we have done a first interview and a second interview. We've set them forward for hiring. We're just waiting for the background check to come back on that. I have filled in and covered that position as well, as those job approvals and course assignments and stuff cannot just wait until we get somebody in. And so that position's been vacant as well since the end of just this last year. We've turned in our SLAY report, which is a state report that is posted on our website. You can find that on our homepage. And Yvonne, our Assistant Executive Officer, takes the lead on that. And that has been turned in and is currently with agency for review at this particular moment. So a lot going on. We are continuing to meet with board leadership to discuss whether or not our board staffing and our units are organized in the way that is the most efficient. And so based on some feedback, we have reached out to the Office of Human Resources with DCA to talk about doing a stepped-in approach for a reorganization. One of the first things that we will be doing is changing the supervising nursing education consultant position over the continuing education and research unit, to change that to a probably an SSM2, which is a supervising staff supervising manager level 2, so that we can get that hired. The NECs have been a very difficult position to fill. And so we're looking at what we can do to make that a position that can be hired, and then that person can come in and actually create that unit. That unit was given to us as part of the budget change proposal that was granted to us, I believe, in 2019. And because of it being a supervising NEC over that unit, we've not been able to hire and build that unit yet. So we are looking at redoing that and coming at it from a very different approach than what we would have typically done. And so those are some of just the high level stuff. I'm sure as we continue to go through the process, we'll have more things to share as we go through, but I just wanted to kind of cover those as my executive office report. Other than that, we're continuing to make improvements, and our board is continuing to stay in about an 80% telework fashion that is really helped with the morale and the work-life balance for our employees. So thank you very much. Do you guys have any questions on the executive officer report?
Does the board have any questions?
I don't, but thank you, Lori. That was great. Great information.
Thank you.
Board. All right.
It is information only.
Yeah.
So we can go out to public comment at this point. The motion is needed.
If there's no further questions, let's go out to public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comment. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you.
I
Moving
forgot
on.
one report out, Dolores, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We did have our first of 2 all-staff meetings as well with the BRN. That is something that we hold twice a year to make sure that they that all of the staff kind of hear from me as well as the executive leadership team.
Thank you, Lori. All right, moving on to item 5.2. This is also information only on the strategic plan and goal progression. And this is you again, Lori.
It is starting on page 7 of the materials under 5.0. You will find the strategic plan. It is the strategic plan that was created by input from each one of the executive leadership team. It was also then presented to the board and approved in 2021 to start implementation in 2022. The goal is to have all of the items completed on the strategic plan by 2025. So we have gone through with our team and have updated completed activities as well as ongoing activities for the board and our public to see as we make strides to meet those goals that were set. So some of the you can go through and see some of the updates. You can see that we haven't met each one of these statuses yet. They do remain blank because we do have a lot of ongoing processes that have to be addressed. That's one thing that I really noticed coming from private sector to public sector is that there's a lot of things that have to be stepped in order to get to the ultimate goal. So we do a lot of different things to address that. You'll see under the goal 1 in licensing that you can see a bunch of things that are in parentheses called Enlighten License Project. That is a project that the board took on with DCA a little over a year ago, and we've been still working diligently to implement those changes. It was a history of our board where we would get recommendations before and maybe not implement all of the recommendations. And so progress was not something that continued and a lot of times halted. And so with the assistance from the team, we've really gone through and taken those recommendations to heart. And you can see where we have completed a lot of activities that are contributed to ELP, and that's the Enlighten License Project. And we do continue to still implement those. The verification process that has truly been streamlined. It is at a process where we can almost put met. We're still working out some kinks with getting some data cleaned up to share with NCSBN, but NCSBN has taken over our license verification for our in-state RNs. We do still have to do a verification to any international request if one of our nurses wants to move and go to Australia. We would have to do a license verification for them to go to Australia. That is not something that NCSB then does at this particular moment. Additionally, APRN license, we are working to join that system with nurses as well so that we can start using them to do license verifications for all of our advanced practice RNs. On the advanced practice completion of initial review, that is something that we've done very well in our APRN unit, is to do the initial review for all applications received for public health nurse, nurse practitioner, clinical nurse specialist, nurse anesthetist, and nurse practitioner. That initial review is typically missing a lot of documents. And so we did an update with that as well. And I'll share that out on the licensing update later on to kind of go into specifics on that. So the board will be changing, and we are in the process of moving from reporting out initial review. On our website, you see a processing times button that takes you to a web page on our website that shows when our licensing staff have reviewed the initial application, and we let them know whether it's complete. And if it's complete, we can issue a license. If it is not complete, we let them know what they're deficient in. That is not a clear indicator to the applicant of when they can expect to see their application approved and a license issued. And so we've, part of the education, the Enlighten License project was to change that to report out data that from application received to application to license issued versus application received to application reviewed. So that is a change that we are doing, and we're making some IT updates to accommodate that. We've already done some regulatory updates to accommodate that. And so now we'll go into actually implementing that really in the near future. I think one of the IT updates is scheduled to be released in June. And if that goes through, we will start that process with all of our endorsement apps. Looking just all through that, we can go, there's some further licensing and working on accessibility and stakeholder communication. One of the supervisors in our public information unit really had an amazing idea that she brought to her direct supervisor on having our call staff, our public information unit individuals that answer our phone, to be able to assist the caller with licensing activities as soon as they call. A previous process that was that occurred is our call center would get a phone call. They would have a comment on whether or not where their application is in processing because they were waiting on it. And then that information would have to be transferred to licensing. It would go on a call log, and then licensing staff would have to call back. That was a huge dissatisfier for our customer service and the people calling into the BRN. And so this person brought the idea forward to say, can we start helping with this process? And so our public information unit and our call center, there were people that volunteered to be the first ones to learn how to process endorsement apps. And they have truly been an amazing contributor to decreasing our processing times and increasing the satisfaction in customer service. And so that has been fantastic, and is continuing to work through that process. We did update our Contact Us, and we've definitely initiated a protocol for nursing registries, hospitals, and traveling nurse companies to obtain a weekly application status update. And that comes through, again, our assistant executive officer as well as our chief of licensing. So we do have obviously some ongoing activities, but truly just wanted to call some of those out. The next page, on page 12, we talk about the combination of the applications for nurse practitioner furnishing, nurse midwife, and nurse midwife furnishing. Those have been combined since January, but in that combination, there were some items that still needed to be addressed and improved. It wasn't it was one of those things that you implement and you realize that that didn't work the way that we thought it was going to work. And so we've gone back to the drawing board. We are looking at how we can improve that process and hope to have a new application released before the end of this year to address that and really streamline that process. So again, more process improvements through licensing. And then on page 14, you can go to the enforcement goals. Our Division of Investigation pilot does continue, but we did have a influx in investigations coming into the BRN that really increased our investigator caseload. As part of our process that we shared with the California State Auditors, we did discuss having only 30 cases assigned to each special investigator. We were at that 30 mark for every single special investigator. And our supervising special investigators were actually taking cases onto their dashboard to try to assist so that those cases can be investigated in an expedited manner. What happened with that is there was discussion that the pilot that was currently in effect with the Division of Investigation, we asked for a section of that to be paused. So our assistant executive officer met with Division of Investigations. I met with the heads of DCA, And together we were able to work to get that pilot on a temporary pause. That has allowed our staff to clear out any of the investigations that were waiting to be assigned, and our supervising special investigators are still assisting with that. And now with the onboarding of the supervised special investigator 2, we hope that that unit can get kind of back on track and really go forward. Again, truly just a partnership with our assistant executive officer who really streamlined and took on that that role during that break. It was pivotal to us being able to manage through this. In addition, that unit was part of the California state audit that they came back in to look at us and say, are we still doing what we're supposed to be doing in regards to the 2016 California state audit and the whistleblower audit that we received in 2020. And so that has wrapped up. They are finalizing their report, and I'm sure that we will receive that relatively soon. And even if they find areas of improvement, which I'm sure that they will, because every process can be improved, we are grateful for the feedback, the input from them, and we look forward to implementing anything that they recommend for us. Additionally, in enforcement, we are still looking, going through with the Office of Performance Improvement, and that's not what it's called. It's called OIO. Sorry, Organizational Improvement Office. Let me get those terms correct. They are continuing to work through our enforcement staff. They spend about 8 to 12 hours a week with our enforcement staff, and they are mapping every single process that is going on in that enforcement unit, from the initial complaint received to the disposition of it, and then working through intervention in our probation processes as well. And so our leadership in those units have really started to take that feedback as they're even going through it to implement those changes. And so you will see that there are a lot of activities being completed here as well, and working towards that. DCA also went out and got a third-party cost recovery service, and that has just started, and we are now working with that. Kind of on page 16, we go into goals for continuing education. Again, this one is a slower process because, as we did discuss in my executive officer report, that we have not been able to hire in a supervisor for that unit. And so we are again changing the supervising NEC role to a SSM2 so that we can get that process really just ramped up and working better with that. We did meet with DCA's IT to discuss a website improvement to allow for our licensees to be able to search through all of our continuing education providers and the courses that they offer. And so we are in the beginning planning stages of that. There will be a while before that comes, but that is a service that we do want to offer. So that will be something that is to come. Down in goal number 4 is education oversight, and that again starts on page 18. There was a lot of direction from our sunset bill that was passed through last fall on really what to do with educational oversight. And a lot of it codified some of the stuff that we currently did, and then really just brought to light some of the improvements that we can do. So our nursing education consultants during COVID went to a virtual model for continuing approval visits with all of our schools. This fall, they will be out doing in-person visits again as a hybrid. They are continuing to work with the accreditors and do those visits simultaneously. There's a lot of work and a lot of coordination that goes on there. And so really just appreciative of the flexibility that that entire unit has been able to provide over the last few years as we've gone through a California state audit recommendation on approvals and our sunset bill that really targeted it. there is really looking at support of regional consortiums to promote equitable clinical placements and reduce clinical impaction. That was a goal that we put, and that's on page 19. And as we kind of go through these workforce discussions and look at these enrollment increases, that really is a piece of data that I think would be fantastic. If there's any legislative staff out there that want to take that on and put that into a bill for us, that'd be fantastic. One of the things that we had a presentation on, I believe in 2019, was from the San Diego Nursing Education Consortium. They were one of the top performing consortiums. They have several consortiums that they oversee throughout the state. They also have the statewide consortium in Nevada, and they do a consortium for Texas as well. That recently went through a change of ownership, and American Data Bank has taken over that. And so we are interested to see if that continues to be the kind of flagship example with consortiums. And if so, now that a very larger, more well-known company has taken over, whether that will grow to be statewide. Our fingers are crossed. We do definitely see the impact that a statewide consortium would have, and that truly would be of a benefit to be able to have a lot of data for our schools to make decisions, entrepreneurs that want to start schools, our healthcare partners to be able to do clinicals and coordinate that. That would be really pivotal. So we'll see where that moves in the next few years. Again, continue to assess and report on workforce needs. As a board, you guys did start that initial discussion in February, board, and today you guys will also hear out from UCSF, Joanne Spetz, that collects the workforce data with us, and that is in a future agenda item that we're hoping to aim for about 10 o'clock today, and I think that's agenda item 6.0. A lot of changes again to regulation. And so we'll move right into goal number 5, which is laws and regulations on page 22. You can see that there have been several stakeholder engagements and meetings and ongoing activities. And then just working with really getting a lot of regulatory updates as our regulations had kind of stalled in the update process in the last few years. And so, not last few years, sorry, in the years prior to COVID. And so COVID forward, there's really been a focus on updating our regulations. And we've had several packages approved through Office of Administrative Law. And now with our chief of ledge, who's been here about a year now, we continue to have huge improvements with that. And you'll hear from her more later on as well. And so on page 24, you can see the list of approved regulations that have been moved through, and then you can see underneath that ongoing activities. Organization and development is down on goal number 6. You can see that we did have our all staff meetings. We are continuing to work on stakeholder engagement and really change the culture within our board to be one that is supportive and looking at quality improvement and really getting a lot of feedback and really showing that we are a team and not really fall under that 80-20 kind of concept where 20% of the people do 80% of the work. And that's something that our BRN strives to really show, that we are a team. We all have equal input, and we all show up each day to really contribute to the overall success of our board. We talk about continuing education for our board members. Again, we have Joanne Spetz presenting today as more continued education. We had HCI last board meeting, and so we are continuing to work towards getting all of that information out. And then goal number 7 is our outreach. I'm now reporting those out as part of the EO updates so that you guys can see and hear each one of the items that are not only our BRN staff do, but that I do as well. We really do work with everybody that kind of reaches out to us. We even have enforcement staff doing presentations with the California Student Nursing Association coming, I believe, this week. And so there are web requests on our website where you can ask for presentations, you can ask for interactions. And those are submitted and reviewed, and we look for staff that can assist with that and provide those presentations. So that is the update on the strategic plan. It is there for you guys to review. I'm open to any questions. This is, again, information only, so no motion needs to be done. But if there are questions from our board, please let me know.
President Trujillo, I have a couple of questions and a comment.
Go ahead, Trish.
Lori, thank you. Wow. I mean, it's so clear how much progress you're making. I really appreciate the way you have this laid out where we can see that maybe the overarching goal isn't met, but 8 steps of 10 have been met. So I just really appreciate it. And great job to you and your team for undertaking this hard work and, really making great strides. So thank you for that. Just 2 quick questions. So, what is your overarching goal timeline? So, I mean, it's easy to see how many things that you've met, but when are you hoping to have everything completed? I know a lot of it is ongoing work.
Yeah, most of it is ongoing work, but we really want to take big chunks out and have most of these met by our last board meeting in 2025.
Oh, cool.
This is a strategic plan that was developed in 2021 to be implemented between 2022 through 2025. And so at that point, our hope is all of these are met. We do have some realistic expectations that might not happen. But because it was definitely a very in-depth goals here to really make some changes. But our team is amazing. I couldn't do any of this without them, and really just moving towards 2025 so that November you guys can hear, yes, we've met each one of these. So
Thanks, Lori. Great leadership.
That's that North Star.
Great leadership and great teamwork. Thanks. One more quick question. So under the section, and I don't have it on my screen right in front of me, but under the section where you talk about discipline, and I know these cases take time and there has to be due process, and I totally understand that. But I just wonder if there's a case that's really egregious. Is there a way to fast track that? I mean, I know in reading the cases that we all read every week, some of them are events that happened in 2021 and we're seeing them in 2023. I get it. But if there was really an egregious case, is there a way to really streamline that and move it through the process a little bit faster?
Yes and no, and I'll explain that answer. The public protection we can do immediately. If there is an egregious case that comes in, we have 2 options. One's called a PC 23, which is a Penal Code 23, and that is received. I'm sorry, the Penal Code is not received. The complaint comes in. It's typically an egregious criminal activity of some sort that comes in, and then based on that, our staff in enforcement reach out to the AG and say, we are requesting a PC 23 and this is why. If that PC 23 is granted, and again, it's a legal process, so it's not something that the board decides, we are able to request it. We are able to give supporting data as to why it is requested. But legal, because of it being a legal process, they're the ones that ultimately decide. If they decide that they can have staff showing up at their criminal proceeding hearing instantly, and their license is revoked on the spot. There may still be court cases and stuff that happen that person has to participate in, that goes through to a final resolution where they're either convicted or not. But that process takes time, but the public protection is immediate if a PC 23 is granted and that license is revoked. The other option is a interim suspension order. That is another legal avenue that we can request if for some reason the PC 23 was not granted. And so then we would request an interim suspension order and hope again through the legal process that is granted. And if that is granted, we can suspend the license immediately so that they cannot work so that as we're doing the investigation, as we're going through that process to get a final outcome on whether it's a conviction or not, that at least the public protection is upheld. So even those numbers show that it is a lengthy process. The public protection is addressed instantly in egregious cases with a PC-23 or an ISO. The less egregious cases, we do have to make sure to remember that everybody is innocent until proven guilty. And so we get the complaint received that an investigation has to happen. There has to be proof that these things occurred. It has to go through the legal process. And that is why you will see these timelines, because they are in the, in the legal system, and we do have to wait. The BRN sections are done in a very timely manner. What we typically see that cause these lengthy kind of timelines is the legal system that it has to move through.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your work.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions too, and again, want to echo what Tricia said about the great work that you and your team are doing, Laurie. You're really making significant progress. Is it possible to speak to also what Tricia asked about the progress that's being made on so many of the goals? And we know that they're in process. Would it be possible in the category, the status, to put maybe a percentage complete, some assessment, so we can at least track over time that how we're moving forward? Is that something?
I would love to do that. I don't know that that's 100% something that we can do. What we typically find with these processes is as we address one item, another item is discovered. And so then we have to address that item, or 3 more items are discovered. And that's kind of been the bane of my existence the last couple of years, is as we peel back the layers of the onion, we just realize that how deep this goes. And so I think reporting out a percentage would be misleading. But if there were processes on here that are cut and dry, I will absolutely work with staff to get percentages on those. But some of these more in-depth processes that we're still learning and working with other partners on, I don't know that we can give a kind of percentage. I just don't know how we would qualify it.
Yeah, I wonder if it's just our best known at this time status, right? Because, and then if it changed the next time and we ended up going backwards, it explained, this is what happened. We opened up and found out this Pandora's box of something. So anyway, it would be helpful. Right.
A lot of our processes are Pandora's boxes. We open them and go, wait, what?
Yeah, which, what's good.
Yeah,
If you can't fix what you don't know, right?
Absolutely. I will take the percentage status back to staff, and we'll see what we can do to let you have that, Mary.
And then a couple of the things at the end were that we reference a customer satisfaction survey.
Yes.
How does that work? Because I don't think we see results on a regular basis for the customers, or at least if we're getting them, I'm not tracking it to being a customer satisfaction survey.
Yeah, so typically with the customer satisfaction surveys, those come out and they're reported out in our sunset. You'll see a lot of those in our sunset. So our sunset reviews really go through all of those in detail. So if you wanted to see the last couple ones, you can pull up our sunset review reports that were submitted last year and the year prior. Now that we have a 4-year sunset, yeah, we should probably find a way to report those out at board meetings when they're completed. And we'll get that in here as well. It's embarrassing to admit, but if you go onto Google and look at our rating, we are at 1.5 stars. That is an improvement though, because we were at a 0.5 star when I took this position. And I think that it really, nobody wants to call the BRN. There's not a single licensee or applicant out there that says, hey, today I want to get up and spend time on our phone lines and call the BRN. So when we do get calls, they are typically in need of something. And that means that's a service we didn't provide thoroughly. And so as we make a lot of these licensing updates, and changes to those processes, I can see that really making an effect. And remember that when things are going well, people don't let us know. And so we did a huge impact to the 30,000 nursing students in our state. By doing the grad upload, our board took a vote to do that process in lieu of receiving paper transcripts. It's an electronic data bank that we built, not a data bank, an electronic portal that we built with DCA that allows our directors of nursing to come in and log into a portal and say, yes, all of their students have met their licensing. And so our 30,000 licensed by exam California grads on an annual basis have a 24-hour turnaround time for the BRN. And that is something that had never happened before. So we're not going to have anybody contacting us on that ever again. But they're also not going to go to Google and say, I received great customer service from the BRN. So although we truly took the largest chunk out of licensing and addressed 30,000 nursing applications by exam to be done and through in 24 hours, we're not going to reap the benefit of that through any of these customer service surveys, because the reality is we have no customer service interaction with them anymore, because they go online to Breeze, they complete their application, they pay their fee, they get their live scan, and their director of nursing enters the data in the portal, and the next person they hear from is Pearson VUE. Because at 24 hours, our system communicates with Pearson VUE that they have an authorization to test. Pearson VUE then says, hey, we have the authorization to test from California, please schedule your NCLEX. And so what we'll continue to hear is the customer service areas that we need improvement on. And those are with our endorsement apps, our advanced practice apps, and you'll see how we're working to address that in our licensing report coming up and some of our future agenda items today, where we're asking for transcript updates and different processes for you guys to, and our APRN update for you guys to consider. So hopefully that answered your question, Mary.
Yeah, could we get a report on the actual customer satisfaction survey maybe at the next board meeting? Would we have enough information to do that?
We'll have the last one that we can report out. I'm not sure the date on that, but we can do that, and we can add that to the
Yeah, I'd love to track that on a regular basis. And when just scrolling through the Google reviews, there's 3 in the last 2 months that were super positive about the person that they spoke with and how quickly it was. So there's definitely some good going on.
There absolutely is. It's not all negative anymore.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board? I want to thank you, Lori. You're doing a spectacular job, and you and your team, and we truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's open it up for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, I would like to make a comment. Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, I would like to make a comment. Tia Delaney Stewart would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
I just wanted to say, yes, thank you for all of the hard work that you're doing to really change the culture. And I know it's not reflected yet in the surveys that are out there and the stars that are being received. But I definitely, as a registered nurse here in Los Angeles, have heard positive feedback from the students that I work with about the turnaround time and other things that have been positive. So to stay positive with that energy, and thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, moving on to 5.3. This is also information only. This is the registered nursing fund condition. Who is presenting?
Suzanne will be presenting. Board moderator, can you elevate her, please? Suzanne Balkas. And then board moderator, as you're at it, can you please elevate Joanne Spetz? She will be presenting agenda item 5.4, please.
Hi, good morning.
Sorry, go ahead, Suzanne.
Morning.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Suzanne Balkas, and I am a budget analyst with the DCA Budget Office. And I want to thank the board member and the executive officer to allow me to present today the fund condition. We'll be presenting the board's fund condition that we currently have FM9 projections included into. So please refer to page 32 in agenda item 5.3 of your meeting material. For 21-22 actual, the board have a beginning balance of about 35 million with a prior year adjustment of 1.3 million, which gives you an adjusted beginning balance of about 36.2 million. We have an overall revenue of 80.1 million and a transfer to general fund AB 84 of about negative 2.2 million. And a total expenditure of 58.2, and that gives us a fund balance of about 56 million or about 10.5 months in reserve. The next column is current year, which is 22-23, which we have FM9 included into. The board have a beginning balance of about 56 million, projected total revenue of about 79 million, and we are tracking an overall projected FM9 expenditure of about 64 million. With that expenditure and revenue, we currently have a fund balance of about 71 million, which gives you about 12.7 months in reserve. Budget year is based on governor's budget, and budget year +1 is based on realize. We're also projecting a loan payback of about 30 million in 24-25 from the general fund, but we do not have any concern for this fund. Please let me know if you have any questions.
I have just one quick question. Thank you so much for this presentation. The line item, and again, I don't have it on my screen right this minute, but the line item about money going to the general fund for, general operating expenses, is that then tied to the loan repayment?
Yes, and it is, and we projected, it says 30.2 million, and that is going to be the interest paid back. But that's also an estimate, just to let you know, it's an estimated interest.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments?
The one comment that I'll add to this is we do have a healthy fund. And because of that, we are looking at streamlining processes, and we'll be looking at our fees to see if we do need to adjust down. To accommodate us to be able to adjust down in our sunset bill, when we met with legislative staff, we asked for all fee floors to be removed. And that was done in our sunset bill. All of our fees were set at the statutory minimum. And so now that those fee floors have been removed, we can do an evaluation as we do process improvement to see if we can decrease the fees. We have had almost an artificially inflated budget the last few years due to COVID and the influx of RNs into our state. In 2020, we only had about 10,000 licensed by endorsement applications. In the 2021 report out that 2020-2021 was about 10,000 endorsement apps. And those are RNs in other states that want to come and work in California. Then in 2021 to 2022, we doubled that to about 20,000 endorsement apps. And then in 2022 to 2023, we increased to 40,000 endorsement apps. And so we operate on fees received, right? We're a special funded board. We do not get general fund. And so our endorsement applicants have exponentially increased since COVID. And that's something that we had never planned on. There was no way to predict that that would occur. To go from 10,000 in fiscal year 2020, 2021 to 40,000 in our fiscal year 2022 to 2023. So we are showing a decrease in endorsement applicants this last fiscal year, so 2022 to 2023. And so we're looking to see how that affects our fund. Some of the other things that we've done is our continuing approval visit fee that was paid by our schools that were approved after 2013 was removed as part of the sunset bill. We also combined our applications, our nurse practitioner furnishing, nurse midwife furnishing. And because those are now combo acts, it is no longer charges the additional $350 that was needed for furnishing processing of that application. So that is a fee that has been decreased as well. And so we're going through these different processes right now to see what we can do to kind of combine and decrease and kind of wait out to see what happens with our endorsement apps. Are they going to continue to decrease now after we've gone over the hump with COVID, or are we going to stabilize and have a new norm? And if that is there, then we will start to look at addressing some of the fees. One of the big ones that I think we can address fairly soon will be our license by exam for our California grads. Again, because that process is now almost 100% automated, there is a few things that our licensing staff have to run reports, reach out to directors of nursing, provide education, monitor that. There is going to still be a fee associated with that, but it may not be as high because all of our fees are based on staff hours and time worked. They're not just an aberrant kind of fee. We do desk audits, we do studies, and we pay for staff time based on those fees received. So that will be one of the first ones that we look at.
It's wonderful, Lori. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing that there's no further questions or comments, BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right. Before we move on to item 5.0, I would like to ask for a 5-minute bio break.
Sounds good. We can go ahead and pause until 10:10. That is 5 minutes.
Good.
And we will be ready to start 5.4 with Joanne Spetz from UCSF. Thank you, guys. Okay, if you can do a quick quorum, Dolores, come off mute. I'm not able to hear you, Dolores. You're still on mute.
Dolores Trujillo is present. Vice President Mary Fagan. Vice President Mary Fagan. Okay, moving on, Elizabeth Woods,
Woods here.
Jovita Dominguez, Patricia Nguyen.
I'm sorry, Jovita's here.
Thank you, Jovita.
Win
Patricia
here.
Nguyen, David Lawler.
David's here.
Thank you, David. Vicky Granowitz
Granowitz here.
and Vice President Mary Fagan. Okay, I believe we still have a quorum.
We do.
I'm here. Sorry.
All right, thank you, Mary.
Mhm.
Okay, so we can begin.
Yes, please. Thank you.
On
So-
item 5.4, this is information only. This is our presentation by University of California, San Francisco on analysis of nursing workforce conducted pursuant to Business and Professions Code, Section 2717.
Thank you. Joanne, are you able to come off mute? And are you able to be on camera? If not, that is okay. We just want to test your audio and visual.
I thought I was on camera. Hold on. I think I should be visible.
You might be. I'm just looking here real quick. You are visible.
She
Yes, I
is.
can see
She is.
you. Yep.
Thought so.
Perfect.
All right. And then I have slides to share. May I do that?
Absolutely.
Just make sure I share the correct version. Yes, this will be it. All right. So okay, so you should be able to see that screen now. Yes?
Yes, we can.
Yay. All right, the technology works. We use Zoom here at UCSF, so new platforms are always confusing. Thanks for the opportunity to come and share these preliminary results from looking at what's happening with our workforce in California. I'm going to go pretty quickly through, and I'm sure that everybody will have questions, and so I'm happy to take any questions. Let's see. So this project is largely around projecting the supply of nurses, and then trying to think about also what the demand for nurses is likely to be into the future. So and then do comparisons of that. So just, it's not on the slide, but we use the 2 or 3 main data sources that we use are the survey of registered nurses that's conducted every 2 years. The 2022 survey is in the analysis phase right now. So I'm going to show you preliminary data from that for the people who responded to the survey online. The paper data still needs a little bit of cleaning up before we can add that in. So these are preliminary. They may change before the publication comes out. We use data from the annual school surveys, which are a tremendous source of data and information. And then we also get administrative data directly from the board. So thanks to Stephen Wong for sending those off to me every year or two whenever we need to update these forecasts. This year we will be doing regional projections. I don't have those yet. I'm going to be doing those when we get the final data from the survey. And then we will be looking at different regions of California in more detail. And I do have one slide to give you a sense about the kinds of differences we expect to see across regions. So we do have new data. We have, as I already mentioned, and then also I try to incorporate into the models now some information about vacancy rates for hospitals from the Hospital Association of Southern California's quarterly surveys. I am waiting to get from them the most recent 2022 one, so I have an older vacancy rate of 7.2% for hospitals built into this model. And then I also have some additional data that I have pulled together on looking at the differences between the number of graduations and the numbers of new licenses per age group, which I think reflects a combination of people not passing the NCLEX and also graduating from California, but getting their first license in another state. And those were things that I had not accommodated in these forecasts until last year when we did some models. The basic structure of the model is actually very simple in its core. It's what people call a stock and flow model, and I have a diagram and I'll describe that in a minute. And for demand, demand is actually really tricky. I'll talk about that more, but in general, we compare with national benchmarks and with projections that the California Employment Development Department publishes. So on the supply side, what I mean by stock and flow model is that we know in that green bubble that we have a certain number of nurses with active licenses, and I focus on those with California addresses. We have an inflow of nurses and we have an outflow of nurses, and that affect the number of people in that green bubble. And then people in that green bubble make decisions about whether to work, whether they're going to work full-time or part-time, what setting they're going to work in, and so on. In these models, I focus on the decision to work and how many hours a week on average nurses are working. I do not get into settings. And the reason I don't get into settings is that, that basically there's no distinction in nursing licenses. It's not like teaching where a person can be credentialed as a single subject biology teacher and they cannot then go and teach English. A registered nurse can be working in a hospital or they can be working in home health. There's no specific credential that is necessarily required or designated for a nurse to move from setting to setting. So those movements from setting to setting are largely determined by the overall desirability of the jobs. And that is to some extent or a large extent on the employers. I can look at the numbers of kind of warm bodies of registered nurses that are potentially supplying their labor. And if there is a imbalance between settings, then it really is not, it's not something that can be formally modeled very well. So that's just kind of setting that table for your expectations. So we have data for the number of nurses with active licenses in California addresses from March 2023. I group those into 5-year age groups. And then I add into it the graduations from our nursing programs, and I put those in the same 5-year age groups. Immigration from other countries, migration from other states. Inflows also include some small number of people that transition from an inactive back to an active license or from a lapsed license back to an active license. The losses of nurses, the outflows, are largely migration to other states and then transition to inactive or lapsed licenses. And the migration to other states is kind of tricky because somebody could request an endorsement to another state, but we don't know if they ever go. They might go there to travel. They might never move. You know, maybe they were thinking about it and they don't go. And so we also have been doing comparisons of looking at the overall license list in 2020 and the overall list in 2022, and looking to see who was in the data in 2020 and disappeared. So they lapsed their license. And then who was in 2020, but their address changed and they're no longer in California. And then conversely, we look at who's in the data in 2022 that didn't exist before. So those would be our new licensees. And then who's in 2022 that maybe lived in a different state in 2020 and now live in California. So we kind of look at those changes to try to get another way to get a sense of migration between states and also lapsing licenses. And we get explicit data from the board about transitions to those inactive and lapsed licenses and kind of compare them all with each other. So let's start with the graduation data. These have been really interesting, and I know that some schools are sending slightly revised data. So I think these might not be completely final yet, but they give you a sense about what's been happening in California over a really long period of time. About 20 years ago, those who remember, we were in a really deep nursing shortage, and we were not graduating anywhere near the number of nurses we needed to graduate in California. We more than doubled our graduates from like 2001 to 2009. And our nursing schools were completely heroic in their work in doing that, with a lot of support from the state and from foundations. Our numbers of graduations have been pretty stable since then. And with some growth in the few years prior to the pandemic. And then you can see a little bobble there of projected reduction in graduations over this kind of when we expect when we get the next round of survey data, we're going to see fewer graduations. And that is because a lot of people got delayed due to the pandemic, and also a lot of schools could not admit full cohorts during the pandemic. The projections, we ask schools to tell us what they anticipate their enrollment will be next year and the year after. And based on what they tell us, we project to return on a growth trajectory over the next few years. To give you a sense about admission applications, and I want to point out that this includes people who might have applied to multiple schools. So this is duplicated data. There may be people who are applying to 6 or 7 schools and get into one, and we can't tell you how many people truly didn't get into any school at all. But for applications, what this does give you a sense of is that the entry-level master demand for that education's gone up a little over the years, but it's been pretty flat. Associate degree program applications have been pretty flat through the pandemic period. And bachelor's of nursing applications have been continuously rising, especially since like the mid-2010s. So for the availability and utilization of admission slots, there's a caveat on these data. So the teal line is the number of admission spaces available, but we have one very large program that did not report data for 2 years. So I think that there's probably could be a straight line drawn between that 2021-22 point going back to 2018-19. There probably is more continuous growth rather than like a 1-year spike up in the number of slots. You can see that the new enrollments are not filling all the available slots. And we plan to do a little more looking to see what schools or programs have the most unused spaces, because I think that'd be really good information for prospective students to know where there might be potential spaces for them to go into nursing school if they don't want to wait for their whatever program they're waiting for has a wait list. For completion and attrition data, these I think are really interesting. The teal bars are the percentage of nurses that complete on time. And the question is asked at the, how many people were scheduled to graduate this year in say 2021-22? And of the people who, when they were admitted, were supposed to complete in this academic year, what percent actually completed this academic year? And you can, generally it's over 80%. In some years, it's pushing close to 85%. You can see in the 2021-22 cohort, which is the cohort that was most hit by the pandemic, that we had a little bit of a drop back down in the percentage completing on time. That also may have been affected by the one large program that did not report for a couple of years. You can also see a growth in the percentage that are delayed in their progress. And again, I suspect some of that's pandemic, and a little bit of an increase compared to the prior 2 years in the attrition rate. But overall, our schools are doing pretty good on getting people out on time. So for the supply forecast, we bring in all these data. We look at, we basically, for each of these 5-year age groups, we assume that 4/5 of the nurses in that age group are going to stay in the age group next year, and 1/5 of them age up to the next group. And 1/5 of the people in the younger age group age into that 5-year age group. We add in the inflows and the outflows by those age groups, and then we multiply those projected numbers of nurses in each age group by employment rates in that age group and hours per week in that age group and get full-time equivalent supply. So some of the changes that we saw in these projections, we've seen a small increase in out-of-state new graduates getting their first licenses in California, and a small increase in international nurses, 400. So percentage-wise, it's a big increase, but compared to some of the international migration we saw in like 2002, this is peanuts. We have more RNs requesting endorsement into California, and I'm focusing on those with permanent California addresses because of so much traveling nursing, which during the pandemic, which I think can muck up our sense about what our workforce really looks like. When we get all the RN survey data in, I am going to specifically look at the people who have out-of-state addresses and how many of them are traveling in and how much they're traveling, and do they think they're going to move here permanently? But I don't have all that data in, so I can't really answer those questions yet. We also had a little bit of an increase in the reactivation rate of lapsed and inactive licenses. Perhaps that's people who let their licenses go inactive or lapse during the pandemic. Maybe it's that there's greater enthusiasm for working in nursing, and so people who thought they would leave have decided to come back. But so on the downside, we also have more nurses moving out of California. I mean, we have more people moving out of California, but we also have more nurses, especially younger nurses. But there is an increase in the rate of moving out of California across all age groups. We also have more nurses aged 39 and younger letting their licenses lapse. Now, some of these people may be moving to other states, and so they're letting their California license lapse. And for older nurses, oddly, interestingly, the lapse rates are actually lower than they were in 2019. So there was a increase in lapse rates for that oldest age group in like 2021, 22. And now they seem to be really, those who are still there are more tied to the labor market. We've got higher employment rates compared to 2020, but lower than in 2017. And we've got more hours per week for nurses, almost all the nurses, but again, not quite as high as in 2017. So for all the supply forecasts, I also do a best case scenario and worst case scenario. So the solid red line is what I call kind of the average of these two. If I took all of the input and output variables and took kind of the best guess for all of them, or the average between the worst and best for each single parameter, you'd end up with that pink line, that solid pink line. In comparison, the 2019 forecast, you can see that. And you can see that currently we are below the numbers that I forecasted before the pandemic. But in the long term, we're expected to grow a little bit faster than the pre-pandemic forecast. I think we're lower because we are pretty sure that we had a lot of older nurses retire precipitously. And then we also have this bubble in our education flow because of the pandemic. In the best case scenario, we just have this rapidly growing workforce, and nurses move to California at really high rates, and our nursing schools just totally rocket on graduating people. And then the way the model's built, it kind of ends up growing exponentially, which is probably not what would really happen. But on the downside, we do need to recognize that there are scenarios where we have a decreasing supply of nurses, that we need to be attentive to schools maintaining their enrollments, maintaining their graduation rates, maintaining their NCLEX pass rates, and then keeping those nurses in California. Those nurses have to find jobs in California or they'll move somewhere else. So demand is super tricky to figure out. There's no kind of holy grail about what demand for nurses should be, because it is affected by so many components of our population. Where are people getting care? What are the workforce models of care? What are the wages being paid? How much can employers afford to hire, et cetera? So we look at a few things. We look at national benchmarks of employed FTE RNs per 100,000. And look at what it would take to be at, say, the 25th percentile nationally. Western states tend to be low on FTE nurses per 100,000. But if we imagine that we are trying to be at, somewhere around 35th of the country, that might be a reasonable benchmark. Employment Development Department produces a forecast for 2030 that we look at. And then I got data from HCI looking at RNs per patient day, and look at the projected growth in patient days based on population growth and the aging of the population. And so it's very similar to the employed FTE RNs per 100,000, but it's essentially adjusting for the aging of the population and having an adjustment to accommodate for that. So for demand, what do we get? So the black lines, the solid black line on the bottom, is what would the demand be to just maintain the current number of FTE RNs per capita that are employed in California. The dashed line at the top is to be at the national average, the big long dashes, and then the short dashes are to be at the national 25th percentile. The brighter blue line is basically kind of maintaining employment FTEs per capita, but accounting for vacancies and basically scaling up the demand by the vacancy rate in hospitals, and also accounting for aging of the population in that long-term projected growth. And I always like to compare it to the EDD projection of employment, and it makes me really happy that that dot and that line are almost right on top of each other. It's a good gut check for whether my models are wildly off course. So if I put these things together, you got the purpley pinkish lines that are the supply forecast, with the solid one being the best one, and the blue lines being the demand forecast, with again the solid one being that vacancy and age adjusted one. And you can see the EDD dot right there in the middle. And what does this tell us? This tells us, I should redo this chart and zoom it in, maybe get rid of that that top high supply forecast line, because it kind of makes the scaling a little weird. But if you look really closely, you can see that we have a shortage right now, and that we would be on track to have that shortage dissipate in about 4 years, 5 years. And so if the RN programs grow as they tell us they think they're going to grow, then we will have enough graduates to fill that shortage that we see somewhere around 2027, and that we should be balanced out right around that time. But as I said, there are a number of different risks around that. And this is also not a sector specific model. So hospitals might say we have a shortage, whereas telehealth employers might have more applicants than they can possibly hire. And this isn't regional, this is statewide. And this does not say that the nurses are living and want to work in the exact places where there is the greatest demand for jobs relative to nursing supply. So to just give you a sense of what we might expect there, these are just the RN to population ratios, no adjustment for employment here. That'll come later. But this is just RN to population ratios by county. And the ones with lower RNs per capita are red. The darker red is the lowest group. And then the ones with more RNs per capita are in the greens, with the darkest green having the most RNs per capita. You can see that there's a lot of regional variation, but there's also some interestingly spotty components to the regional variation, such as in the LA region. San Bernardino is doing pretty well. Ventura and Orange are doing pretty well, but LA and Riverside, not so much. San Diego's doing well. Imperial, not as much. Lower part of the Central Valley, the Kern County, Tulare, Kings area is not doing as well, but Fresno looks like it's not doing so badly. So it's interesting because in the past, the county level data were much more obvious big chunks, like the entire Central Valley was orange and red. And now you can see places where there has been progress. Similarly, like the entire LA area tended to hang together largely, and now we're seeing some variation of what's happening in these different regions and kind of within the different regions. So this is going to be something we have to ponder how to deal with in regional forecasting. So what do we need to be thinking about? Supply is growing, which is good. We definitely were worried during the pandemic about the long-term potential, situation. Demand is really hard to predict. And so I think we just need to recognize that there's no single definition, which is why I tend to present in full candor multiple ways of thinking about demand. We have risks around retirements of RNs and ensuring that new graduates have the skills for vacant positions and that are onboarded effectively. I know employers, especially hospitals, are really struggling with having retirements and then trying to figure out how to onboard new graduates into as rapidly as possible into the highly skilled roles that their retiring nurses have been in. And that also makes it tricky for them to add clinical spots when they're already struggling with how to onboard new hires. Regional differences are really substantial, and these sector differences could be important. So we need to be attentive to all of that. So I'm going to click to exit and stop sharing. I found the right button to stop sharing. Good. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Joanne. That was a great presentation. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have at least one question. And if you already said this, I apologize. I didn't catch it, but Earlier in the presentation, you mentioned a large university that had not yet reported their data. Do you have an expectation? Do you know, can you confirm that that's coming soon, or are we ever going
Yeah,
to see
they,
it?
they did report in the 2021-22 year. So they
Okay.
did report the most recent survey. I don't know that we will get from them the 2 years that they didn't report, but we did get the 2021-22 data.
Okay, thank you.
So that is accommodated in this.
Yeah, the board has reached out to that school. We are working with them. They are interested in coming into full compliance with the board. And our hope is to see them at the November board meeting. And part of getting all that together, we will ask for data to fill in those blanks for Joanne as well. One of the things that we do have for data for the school is we do track NCLEX pass rates, right, for first-time test takers. And with those NCLEX pass rates for first-time test takers, we are able to infer, not 100% accurately, but infer that the people that take the test for the first time just graduated from them. And so if you look at the data on our website for NCLEX pass rates, you can see that that school just this last annual year had probably around 2,581 nursing graduates, because those are the numbers that took the NCLEX. The year prior, they had 2,132 graduates, because those took the NCLEX for the first time. The year immediately prior to that was 1,630. It goes back to 1,421, and then year again for that 1,288. So that program has shown a steady growth over the years. And now that court decisions have been made, we are working with them, and they are interested in coming into full compliance. So we hope to have accurate data that can be used for statewide workforce projections as well as national projections. And we think that we'll get that probably about November of this year.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
Joanne, I have a question. You mentioned in the beginning regarding the vacancy rate of 7.2%. Can you tell me where that percentage comes from exactly?
Sure. The Hospital Association of Southern California does a quarterly turnover and vacancy report. And they, for years, we were also doing surveys of chief nursing officers. And so we were collaborating with them in merging those data together so we could have the HR data and numbers from the HR folks that HASC surveys, and then we would have CNO perceptions. We hope to actually go out there and do that CNO survey again now that CNOs maybe are not drowning quite as much with the pandemic. Anyway, when I was looking through my files, I realized that I think because we haven't done our CNO survey, they hadn't sent us the past couple of reports on their vacancy rates. I think it was just an oversight. So I emailed Terry Hollingsworth there and said, hey, I need this report. And she said, oh, we'll get that to you. So, but it was 7.2% for hospitals in Q4 2021.
Okay.
And so I think I will update that with whatever they report for Q3 2022. I think will be the most recent. Maybe they'll have Q1 ready. By the time we get all the data in, we should have that vacancy rate. So, and I apply that vacancy rate to the entire RN population. So when I'm looking at projecting the shortage, I'm assuming that every nurse employer in California has that 7.2% vacancy rate. But that might not be true, right? So I kind of view that as probably an upper end of number of nurses that we're short in California.
Mm-hmm.
But, I'd kind of rather estimate a little high on that. And it was a few years ago where it was like, where we were talking about how to best use those data. It was like, you know what, we should just put them in there and say, here's our current employment. Here's how many more we know right now employers or hospitals want to hire. Let's just assume that that's what the demand really is that inflated, it kind of inflate that current employment number up.
So is the expectation in 5 years? I know it's difficult to predict, and I don't know why I'm echoing. I'm just wondering, in 5 years, it's difficult to predict where the workforce will be, but it looks like it plateaus out a little bit.
Yeah, well, so that's partly the structure of the model. So the schools tell us how much they expect to grow. So I use that enables me to project out graduations about 4 years. Because if they tell me, oh, next year I think I'm going to enroll, 14,000 nurses are going to get new enrollments, then I say, okay, well, next year I'm going to assume that it's going to take 2 or 3 years, and then those folks are going to show up as nurses. And so when we ask them 2 years out how many enrollments they project to have, then I kind of say, well, that's going to be graduations in 4 years. After that, in the models, I assume very conservatively 1% growth per year. In truth, we have averaged about 3 or 4% growth per year. So I'm pretty conservative on that. So even in that best forecast, it would be very easy for me to say, well, let's try see what it looks like if it's 2 or 3%. But I want to be really conservative on that because as it is, even with that conservative projection, our supply is projected to grow faster than demand as we get out into the later part of this decade. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I don't think that means that you're going to have all these nurses who are unemployed. I think what it means is that employers are going to be able to more easily hire nurses without competing against each other so much with hiring bonuses and wage raises and so on. Those raises are all great for nurses, but in the long term, that's not really sustainable for our healthcare system. So if we have, kind of a bigger supply of nurses, the truth is employers will say, oh my gosh, I can finally hire more nurses to do these things I've always wanted them to do, but I'm not even going to try to post that job right now because I'm just trying to make sure my patients get adequate and appropriate good staffing. So, there's kind of that dream, like the more nurses you have, they do tend to get absorbed into the system because they're like the stem cell of healthcare. They just can adapt into whatever it is that the healthcare system needs because there's just such a great training.
So oh, go ahead, David.
I got a different question on a different subject. Go ahead and finish off.
Oh, so I take those numbers from the schools and project an extra 1% approximately.
Oh, no. So I take the numbers from the schools and then what I do is calculate out over the past like 5 or 6 years. If I had, as an example, say 10,000 nurses enter in 1 year, and 2 years later, I see 8,000 nurses graduate, then I call that an 80% productivity rate or kind of success rate. And I think it averages out closer to 88 or 89% with a 2-year lag. So I take the projections that the schools give me and I apply that same percentage, that's the average of the past 6 years, and use that to project then how many graduates we'll have a couple years out. And then after the schools have told us what their projected enrollments will be, I just then assume that each year they're going to continue to enroll 1% more than they did before, which then would just grow the graduation rate 1% per year after that. I think it's 25, 26 academic years that I can use the school's estimates to go out to.
But that number has come back higher at 3 to 4%.
Yeah. So that's a pretty conservative estimate where we hopefully will be doing, if we continue at 3 to 4%, but at some point schools might say, we're kind of at the capacity that it seems like our local region needs. And I mean, this is where I think we get regional things that may play out. It could be that some regions like Kern County, which was red is my hometown, it wasn't, red in that map. Cal State Bakersfield and Bakersfield College may say, you know what, we got to keep growing. We got to grow faster and keep doing that for the next 10 years. Whereas Fresno County, which is now green, might say, we're doing okay. So let's hold our schools steady. So I think we're going to see some shifts around the state, hopefully, as schools are trying to respond to the local market conditions. Because a lot of nurses, there was a study years ago that found that something like 60% of nurses live and work within like 40 miles of where they went to high school. So it's an international workforce, right? Nurses can move anywhere in the world. But at the same time, a lot of nurses want to go to school and want to live close to where their family is. And so it's kind of hitting that balance between recognizing that nurses can move anywhere, and many of them want to, but a lot of them also really want to have education close to home and stay close to home. And, you know, so it's labor markets are fun that way. They're kind of it's interesting to watch that. And we'll see what happens with broader demographic stuff. I mean, you know, we are seeing kind of more of a loss of younger nurses appearing to move out of state. And, you know, how much of that is because they're with partners who can remote work. And so the whole family is moving away. You know, we'll see how that looks in the long term.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Joanne,
Dave?
I heard from, real quick, Joanne, our board moderator is asked if you can mute when you're not speaking. They believe that your speakers are being picked up on your mic.
Okay.
And causing the echo. So we'll see. Is it still echoey now that Joanne has muted?
I thought it was on.
No,
Oh,
that's fine. It's fine now.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so Joanne, if you can just kind of unmute to speak and then mute really quick, because I think your speaker setup is a little bit different than what we're used to managing. So that will address that. One real quick question that I have is we're working with our board, starting to really look at doing the workforce planning pursuant to Business Professions 2717, which is also why you do your data collection. And it's been very difficult to kind of grab a lot of what should our board do kind of information. And so we started pulling data to see what our enrollment increases were based on what was requested, what has been denied, and kind of tracking that data now the last year. I did go retroactive back to 2018 forward, and it's shared out on data each time that we have a board meeting. And so is there any way in your data that you're able to predict the number of students that need to be in our nursing pipeline to ensure that we meet that 2027 kind of balance, so that we know that we're approving these enrollment growth in a matter that is evidence-based, right? So when we look at 2018, the overall number of new students added to our nursing programs were only 118. Then in 2019, we added 802 more students to our nursing student population. In 2020, because of COVID, that number dipped again and we went down to 282. In 2021, we started to recover our programs. We're saying, hey, we need to increase our enrollments, and we added 1,419 new student spots. And then last year we added 1,197 new student slots. And as you said, those produce graduates 2 or 3 years later. So there's a lot of our programs, a lot of our workforce is coming to our board saying, we need help today. We need to grow today. The good thing is our board heard that. And in 2021, we added 1,400 new slots to our nursing pipeline. And those should be hitting this year and next year. So those graduates are coming, workforce will be supplemented, and we're right on track with that as far as I can see looking at the data and the evidence here. What we want to make sure that we're doing is continuing that kind of forward thinking and planning as we're approving these new student enrollments for this year, to meet the demand that those students will address. All of our enrollment increases that we do this year will address that demand in 3 years from now, right? So we're actually addressing 2026 and 2027 right now this year, which is what you had predicted, we would be equal. You know, we'd be kind of at that. So that's kind of the difficult thing that we're trying to kind of figure out is to really ensure that we are looking at this in a way that meets the needs of California and the nation, because as you did say, nurses can come and go. And as we've seen through COVID, many are becoming traveling nurses, and they are also doing telehealth. And so we have nurses living out of state, taking care of our patients in state through telehealth. We have nurses coming here on travel assignments. We've heard that we have a lot of traveling nurses. And like you had mentioned, because you're not looking at them based on California addresses, here assisting, and a lot of the talk around salary and stuff came out the last few years based on the high demand of nurses, low availability of nurses, which then shot the traveling market for nurses up through the roof, and employers were having to pay money that they can never sustain. And so taking into all of that, as our board really tackles this monumental task of predicting something for workforce and making sure that we're kind of considering all of this, are we on track now? Do we need to do a rapid growth in our schools? Do we need to take that into consideration? Or are what we're doing and what we've done in the last 2 years with increasing our enrollment about 1,000 on an annual basis, if that's working? And one of the slides you showed, which was really shocking to me, was we have more spaces available for our nursing students to go to, and they're not attending. And I think that your future projection on that is amazing. So to be able to find out why and to publish where would be fantastic. On our board website, we just recently updated it to include enrollment numbers per student, per school. And so if you go under our on our homepage and you go under applicants and you go into nursing education, and you click on the nursing programs, the pre-licensure programs, which are our associate degree, our bachelor's degree, and our master's degree, now contain tuition information and the approved annual enrollment. The big thing on there, of course, is just for everybody to know, which we are working with the school to update, is West Coast University says they have 550. That's absolutely inaccurate. We're predicting more, about 2,500 to 3,000. That is an actual enrollment for them for their school. But the rest of the enrollment numbers are accurate as of today. At this board meeting, we'll have new enrollment numbers and we'll have to go and update. But any of that information that could be helpful to us and our board would be very much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. It was somewhere in the, 2003 period when we were deep in that terrible shortage of that time period. I remember getting a call from a legislative staffer in Sacramento who said, how many nurses do we need to graduate to solve this shortage in the next X years? And I was like, well, you needed to enroll those students like 3 years ago to hit the date you have in mind. But I can play with these models and come up with a number. Back then, the number was around 11,000 to 12,000 nurses per year graduating. I think there are reasons to think that the number should be a little higher now. I just think the telehealth and people moving to other states and these other factors. But we are on track to graduate based on what the school's projected, we're coming up with over 16,000 nurses to graduate in the 25-26 year, which I think is consistent with what new enrollments you have added. I mean, that's about, looking at my chart here, that is really about 4,000 more nurses that would be graduating in 25-26 than are graduating now. And so that's kind of the accumulation of what you're describing in growth of programs we're going to see. And that is why we do see project a balancing of the labor market then. With the regional projections, what we can do is then play around with regionally how when people are graduating from, fill in the blank, when they graduate from University of San Francisco, are they staying there or do they move to another county, right? USF is a national draw university. They may actually have a lot of graduates who end up, everywhere in California and in Nevada and Oregon too. Whereas other schools, like especially the community colleges, may tend to graduate people who stay local. And so we can do some playing around in thinking about the growth of programs regionally, because there may be areas where if you looked at the raw numbers, you'd say, wow, you've got way too many nursing students there. What are you doing? But then if we look at the flows of where the graduates go, it may be like, oh yeah, except they're actually filling the hospital, jobs in Stockton or in Imperial County or wherever it might be. So we can kind of play with that and see what we can come up with to help guide you, especially. And also I know HCI is really interested in this because I think some of the governor's workforce development money is getting pulled back because of the budget. But in the long term, the administration does know that there is more they can do to support regional differences and try to think about that. So we have regular conversations with HCI about some of their planning work and how they can interface with these data that help guide you, because it doesn't help if they're saying, oh, we need these programs to grow, we'll give them grant funding, and the board is saying, we actually disagree with you, our data doesn't tell us that. And so, we kind of feed the data to HCI as well, because since we're all really trying to achieve the same goals in California. The other piece that HCI is going to be really attentive to is they have their Office of Healthcare Affordability. And that work of that office is getting off the ground. And one of the components, and that really, for those who aren't familiar with OCA, that's around healthcare cost benchmarks and coming up with cost growth benchmarks, as some other states like Massachusetts have been doing for a few years. But what's really unique about OCA's charge is that it includes requirements that they look at the stability of the workforce as part of their cost benchmarks. And I think that has two components. One is if a hospital or a healthcare organization is told that their costs are growing too fast, they are not allowed to try to control their costs on the back of their labor, right? You can't solve the problem by laying off all your workers. So yeah, that might reduce your cost growth, but that's not okay. So I think that's a part of it. But another part of it is to also look at emerging shortages and help make sure under HCI's charge that if there are shortages emerging that might push wages up and cause healthcare cost growth that is then going to hit Californians' pocketbooks, that they need to be thinking holistically, and that'll be collaboration with all the boards about how to address that. So we actually right now are inking the final signatures on the contract that our team is going to actually help them with defining what those workforce stability benchmarks are. So we're we're grateful that they trust us to help them with that. And there'll be a lot of stakeholders that are going to be, communicated with about how they envision because workforce stability, measures is kind of like, what is that? No other state has done that. So we're really, California is really thinking broadly, and the board's work as a partner in all of that is super important.
Thank you, Joanne. And then based on your data from October 2022 with our students, we do have 31,214 nursing students in our state. And I know when I talk about that at the national level with NCSBN and the other EOs, they're blown away. We do have a really large number here. And probably about, I would say probably we have about 13% of nurses in our state comparatively to the nation. And I think we're tracking right along with that, with our nursing students as well. So hopefully we can help the national shortages also.
I'm going to see, I've got a slide. I'm going to, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to share this really quickly because it, I just need to get my display settings set up correctly. I'm going to just share this really quickly because you'll get a laugh out of it. I think it's a perspective that I have to credit David Lyon, who is the founding president of the Public Policy Institute of California. had this idea for a slide. So just to remind your colleagues at NCSBN about the size and the scope of California, we are East Coastia, right? We are essentially like Pennsylvania to Georgia, or, you know, New Jersey to South Carolina. You can move our rainbow flag state up and down. But when people express shock at how important California is, how big our economy is and everything, it's like, and how diverse we are in terms of different economies, different political views, different regions. It's like, yeah, because we're East Coastia. We're essentially like more than half of the East Coast right there. So I'm happy to share that slide with anybody who wants to use it in their own presentations. I always love bringing that up in academic conferences when people always want to talk about, oh, well, California is not really representative of the United States. And I'm like, you want to bet? We are representative of at least, like if you thought about it regionally, and probably if there was a way, just given the heritage of where I grew up, it's like, there's a little bit of Oklahoma, there's a little bit of Arkansas, there's a little bit of Midwest, California really does have it all.
Thank you, Joanne. David Lawler has been waiting to comment.
That's fine. Thank you. And it really was, I think, more of a comment than a question. Based on the graph of the FTEs of nurses per 100,000 citizens, I noticed Kern County being red and the Bay Area and parts of LA being green. And I wonder how much it's just as a reality of where nurses want to live, because regardless of how you forecast or what who has graduated in the past decade, I know that's always been the case. And I wonder what the board, I suppose, from a policy perspective, could do about that, because it is very noticeable. Like you, I live here in Kern County. Yesterday I was down at Cedars-Sinai, and the care is, it's the level of staffing is noticeably, palpably night and day. So I suppose that's more of a comment than a question, because it's a reality. We cannot, incentivize hospitals to change their business models to hire more nurses in Bakersfield.
Well, I think that there is a perceived desirability, and some of the differences are also just rural communities in general have a harder time recruiting. Often like a two-career couple have a hard time in a rural area, just unless their jobs are perfectly matched to make that work. Being in a mid-sized city is much more likely to have a two-career household make that work out. But, but we also do have regions where we have seen just education has not grown as rapidly as population, right? Bakersfield's got only the two main programs. I think there are a couple other smaller schools in the area now, but there's not a lot of nursing education capacity in the population. I mean, since I went to high school there, the population is more than doubled, way more than doubled. And the school capacity has not more than doubled. Whereas I think Fresno has had a little more education capacity. I think also as Fresno is getting to be a larger city, they are the beneficiary of a little more migration from other parts of California, because it's a little more cosmopolitan. Bay Area, I can tell you, we have a lot of nursing schools in the Bay Area, and people tend to stay. Sacramento also has a lot of nursing education. And I think some of the shift, like Orange County used to be a little more in the yellow to orange colors. And I think West Coast University has played a big role in San Bernardino, Riverside, and Orange County shifting into being green. Well, Riverside, not yet, but San Bernardino and Orange are green now. And I think that has, right. So it's some combination of desirability of the community, where people's family roots are, but then also, do you have enough schools to educate people there? And, my guess is that Kern County has, and Madera and Merced and some of the other counties in that region that are in that red and orange color range, have a lot more people who would be interested in becoming nurses if they could access education more easily. you know, probably true for Mendocino as well. Humboldt's doing pretty well, but I mean, personally, I have a woman who's been working on our team for years and is working as a medical assistant right now, is admitted to the community college in Humboldt, and it has been told it's probably 2 years before she comes off the wait list, and she doesn't want to relocate to begin nursing school. So, you know, I think that's the regional story. She is going to be a fantastic RN and wants to become a nurse practitioner in the long term, and is going to be probably a key person in primary care in her community. But man, you know, she's patient. She is so patient. So, you know, that's where I am glad to hear that the board is really thinking about that. And I think HCI then will have some money to put on the table for the schools that want to grow in the regions where you see that there's the most need for growth.
And just to give you a heads up, Joanne, in the San Bernardino area, the board did hear, and our schools heard as well. And there have been multiple new nursing schools approved in San Bernardino. And so Arizona College was approved there with an annual enrollment of 120. American Career College was approved there with an annual enrollment of 125. Concordia was approved there with an annual enrollment of 216. And I believe there was one more, let me just find it here. GCC, I think, was another one. Marcia First was approved. And so San Bernardino is getting help. So if you look at just that area and see how the board has done this, and this was only in 2021 to 2022, all of those approvals came in. So those students will start to hit and help workforce this year and next year. And so that will be addressed. And then just so you guys know, Kern County Saracosa College was just approved for their feasibility at the Education Licensing Committee. And so that will hopefully get the ratification today by the board. And we'll have a community college in that area that will be able to help out. And when you look at the Kern County area, you look at like what is the closest, right? And we've got Lancaster with Career Institute coming in to help. And then I believe Antelope Valley is in Lancaster. And so those are the ones that you're going to see help out. And then if you look in the Apple Valley area, we've got Victor Valley College as well as Azusa Pacific. And so starting to kind of emerge on those areas of great need. It has been very difficult to get that occur, because if you've got campuses and staff and connections in these larger metropolitan areas like LA, Orange County, San Diego, a lot of the schools want to grow in those areas that they're established. And so having those difficult conversations that said, yes, you're a good school, you have a good product, your students pass NCLEX, your attrition is great, but don't grow in Orange County. Please go grow someplace else so that you can address the issues of various regions. And so it's really great to see that some schools are actually doing that, and hopefully we can continue that.
Thank you, Lori. Any other questions or comments from the board?
Yes, I do. It's Vicky. Can I go?
Sure.
Okay, this may be really far afield, but I keep reading stories about how the kids in school now are really deficient because of the pandemic in a lot of their basic educational needs. Is that going to, down the road, cause delays because you have to have extra study to get them students up to where they need to be in order to actually attend nursing school? Or will the schools have to do remedial education, and will any of that, you think, affect forecasting?
That's a great question. You know, I think that could be a piece of the small increase in the percent of students who are delayed in their progress. But because there are many more applications than there are slots, schools are able to be somewhat selective and try to admit the people who they think are best prepared. Even the community colleges, are able to establish their evidence-based kind of prioritization process for admission, which I think helps to mitigate some of those concerns. In the long term, I think all of us have those same concerns about how the pandemic hit our high school students and younger kids. And hopefully over the next year or two, there'll be adequate catch up. I think I'm particularly concerned that those pandemic impacts affected people of color and people from lower income families the most. And that is really going to potentially impact our movement towards diversifying our nurse workforce. So while, on average, schools can be really selective and they can admit the people who they think are going to be most successful, they may need to work harder to ensure that they maintain the diversity of their student body or continue to grow that and provide opportunities to as many people in California to represent our population as possible. Maybe there also will be some growth of some programs that some schools have established to really specifically foster success for first generation to nursing students. One of my colleagues here, Laura Wagner, has a grant from the California Wellness Foundation that she's finishing up, where she's been working with one UC campus, one Cal State campus, and one community college to see if the program that she developed here at UCSF is translatable to other levels of education in California. And the program looks, it's doing great. It's really helping first generation students feel capable, feel successful, understand where to go get help, and kind of overcome the various types of challenges that first generation to college students have. So, I anticipate with the success of that's going to be a model for a lot of other schools can adopt and think about bringing in, and a great opportunity for philanthropy. Because it's hard it's hard for a school to put in those resources. Schools with high tuition might be able to, use some of that tuition money to provide more student support. That's what a lot of them do already. But then for the public programs, maybe that's a really good opportunity for them to seek philanthropy to help them with that type of programming to support their students.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yep. I have just a question and then a comment, Andrew. And thank you so much for this information. It really, really is helpful. We've been grappling with how to handle all these enrollment increases and wanting to make a decision that's going to, meet the needs of people in California. You said one of the most challenging things that you faced is how to predict demand, but said you did use data from the EDD. What does the EDD? How do they make assessment of demand? Is a question, and then my comment is I think your analysis of supply is based upon the nursing programs telling you how much they plan to grow, right? So I think it's important that demand assumes, I think, that we said yes to all the growth that they're asking for, right? Is that a correct assumption?
I think in general, they're saying how many did they expect to enroll next year and the year after. Now, first, if it's a brand new program, they're not even in our survey data. So we're not counting those in our projections of growth because they have nothing to tell us yet. And for the other ones, I'm sure it varies. I think most of them are pretty conservative in their estimates about what their growth will be. And on average, they tend not to be that far off. Individual schools might totally blow it and admit way fewer than they thought, or even more than they thought because they had a surprise, tranche of funding that showed up. But they're usually not that far off, at least 2 years out. We don't ask them more than 2 years out because I'm sure if we asked them 5 or 10 years out, they wouldn't know what the heck to tell us. It's kind of the nature of that. So let's see. And then you had a first question in there, and I'm trying to.
Oh, the EDD is looking at supply.
Oh, the EDD. Oh
demand.
boy. So their models are largely built off of the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics projections, and essentially those projections are intended to be economy-wide. They're based on general employment trends across sectors of the economy, and they are not necessarily super fine-tuned to be incredibly accurate at a single occupation level. Like, I don't think they're bad, but but I do think we need to recognize that that's part of this giant national matrix where they're trying to forecast how many people we need in animal husbandry, and that we need, in teaching and in social work, and and actually the full models that the feds put out have it by sector too. So they don't not only project this how many nurses we need, they also are projecting how many we need in hospitals and home health and blah blah blah, blah and so on. So so I think they do it's a super complicated model that they do, and they do a really good job with it because that's what they've been doing for ages. And that's why I use it as a gut check. But they only provide one dot out 10 years in the future. So thinking in the longer term, given that it takes a few years for new schools to come online, to get new students admitted, to get them graduated, I worry, I feel like 10 years, looking out 10 years isn't really quite enough. And when I say they look out only 10 years, the most recent projection they released was for 2020 to 2030. So now it's only 7 years out. And, so it's like, it's a little too short a timeline to react if there's, kind of looking down the line and you're like, in 15 years, we're in trouble. So I like to have it in there, but I don't use it fully. There is another federal agency, the Health Resources and Services Administration, that has a projection model as well. And they relatively recently produced new data on it, but they are using national data sources that I think are not nearly as good as what we have in California. And they have a history of producing numbers that really, quite frankly, don't make sense and don't align with any of our in-state data. So I'm going to take a look at them for the final report and consider bringing them in and doing more of a critique on them. But they have a long history of projecting California really, really badly, so I tend to ignore them.
Thank you. And when do you predict the final report will be out?
Ooh, boy. Okay, so I'm like, Leela's I'm imagining Leela, who does the main RN survey report, looking at me like, don't overpromise, because there's always a surprise in the data. I think she will actually have the data that I need to finish out these projections within a month or so, and then the statewide projections will be very quick for me to update because there's only a few things I need from her. And then the regional projections, I'm going to guess August, and that's in large part because I have a vacation in July and won't be working.
And then there's just some processes on the other end of that. It comes to us for review. We kind of our research person reviews all the numbers for accuracy. It has to be print ready. And so typically we aim to get that out with kind of going back and forth with Lizelle and Joanne by the end of the year. I think more so recently it's been the beginning of the next year when it actually gets published because of just kind of going back and forth and getting it print ready. So we'll definitely, as I hear it moving through the process, I will make sure that our board is kept aware of where we're at with that.
Yep, and we can.
Oh, go for it.
Oh, we can coordinate before I go on vacation to see where the regionals are at, and if there may be another board meeting before the formal publication is released, where the preliminary regional forecasts might be in good enough shape to share them with all of you.
That would be fantastic. Thank you, Joanne. On your last report, the 2022 one for workforce, the table A3 shows the academic year, the actual forecasted new student enrollments, and the actual forecasted number of grads. It doesn't have a table on here that says enrollment numbers and what they project to enroll for the next 2 years. Is that something that can be added or have that data shared so that we're able to look at it at a board level so that we can say, the CSU Bakersfield said that they would, their projected enrollment for the next 2 years is this. Is that what they're approved for, first and foremost? And if they're not approved for that, then that's something we would need to take into consideration for planning. And then maybe reach out to them and say, hey, are you planning on doing an enrollment increase in the next few years so you can accommodate that? I think that would be helpful for just kind of our NEC planning their workforce, their work time, as well as ensuring that we are taking into consideration who wants to grow in which area and be able to kind of make those enrollment decisions based on that as well. I know right now our enrollment decisions are limited in what we can consider as a board. Right now, our board cannot consider workforce as an enrollment decision kind of qualifier. That was specifically written into law with our sunset bill, that workforce cannot be a consideration for our enrollment. And that we have to look at resources and such, but we are tasked with the board implementing regulation to look at other areas into what we need to take into consideration for enrollment. And that was put into our sunset bill as well. So as I work with our chief of ledge and start to pull that data on what kind of regulations we're going to consider, bring it to our board and stuff, I think that data would be very helpful for that process and something that our board can take into consideration, saying, are we meeting benchmarks? Are we doing at least what needs to be done to be asked of California to meet those requirements? And ultimately making sure that we're doing more so that we can address some of the need at the national level.
Yeah, the NECs do have those projection numbers in the confidential Excel spreadsheet that and Stephen can point that to you if you've never played with that. But yeah, so that is one of the tables in that confidential spreadsheet. So the NECs can use that to look at projected growth for single schools, for regions, for AD versus BSN, et cetera. And then Liesl is updating, if she hasn't already updated, the Tableau for the public display. I think she's finding Tableau sometimes computes things differently than Excel for reasons that are always mysterious to all of us. So she's trying to do some data reconciliation to make sure that what comes out of the Tableau matches what comes out in the Excel pivots. And then that should be all released.
Thank you. I'm reaching out to him for that right now as we speak. I appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the board? Seeing that there's no further questions or comments, BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, I would like to make a comment. Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, I would like to make a comment. Marie Gilbert would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Marie,
Marie, are you able to come off mute and speak? It looks like she dropped off, Mark.
Okay, hold on here. Let's see.
Oh, she's back.
Marie, are you there? You're unmuted. Oh, you're muted. One more time here.
Can you hear me?
There you are.
Yes.
Thank you.
There we are. Third time's a charm. So my name is Marie Gilbert. I'm the director at the Central California Center for Excellence in Nursing, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity for comment. I'd also like to thank Joanne for a wonderful presentation. I too was a little surprised about the RN to population ratio being green in Fresno. So hopefully there'll be some more work on that, looking into that. Because what I hear from the board is that this data point might be used to determine program expansion. And Fresno has a desperate need, as everywhere, for nurses. And I'm not sure that's reflected in that ratio. So an example, we have just our one local organization currently has 500 FTE vacancies for immediate needs, and they actually feel that's closer to 1,000 because of the expansion within that organization. And within the Central Valley, within Fresno, we currently graduate 487 nurses a year, so we can already see that there's a mismatch there. So again, thank you for a great presentation, but I just was very surprised and would caution us if we are going to use that data point to determine enrollment expansions. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. I agree 100%. Nurses per capita doesn't reflect the projected growth of the population in the community. We know that Fresno County is one of the faster growing counties in this state. It also doesn't account for the age distribution. If Fresno County has more older nurses, then we need to be more worried about retirements coming up. And it doesn't account for the current educational capacity. It's just kind of a starting point that I wanted to share to give everybody a sense about the degree and the wide range of variation we have in supply of nurses from county to county. But the projection work that I'll be doing, the regional forecasts, will account for these other things and hopefully address the exact concerns that you've raised.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Appreciate the time you've taken to present to our board.
Thanks for having me. I will see you again at a future meeting.
Okay, this was an information only item, and so we are able to move on to item 6.0, more specifically 6.1, information on Operation Nightingale. So Operation Nightingale, I'm sure you guys have been hearing about that in the news. We did update our website. We have been working on that with our team here. And so board moderator, can you please elevate Shannon Johnson if she is in the attendees, as well as Christina Sprigg. And so just for everybody to be aware on the call, Shannon Johnson is our Chief of Enforcement, and Christina Sprigg, if she is on, is our Deputy or Chief of Licensing. If she is not on, there, if she is on, perfect. So they agreed to come on to the meeting with me today as we discuss this, in case our board has specific questions that they want to address on how licensing is addressing these issues and how enforcement is addressing these issues. They are the experts in those particular areas, and so I wanted to make sure that you guys had all of the information at your fingertips if needed. So thank you both, Christina and Shannon, for being here. So on January 25th, 2023, the the U.S. attorney released in the media that they had discovered a group of private businesses as well as schools that were participating in a fraudulent transcript scheme. It is primarily located in Florida. There are some reasons around why Florida was a good target for this. Most importantly to note, and I'll read it from the Florida Board of Nursing webpage. It says, the Florida Board of Nursing approves new pre-licensure nursing education programs that meet the application requirements. It defines the Florida law for regulatory authority. It then advises consumers that the board is not authorized to conduct site visits, and oversight of approved nursing program quality measures is limited. And so that's a key factor to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you guys go through kind of wondering why this is happening in Florida. What that means is new schools are approved by the Florida board, and then the Florida board steps back. They do not do continuing approval visits like we do. They do not have laws and regulations that require quality measures, like we have the NCLEX pass rate as one of our quality measures, et cetera, et cetera. In order for our schools to continue to be active and having students grow and progress through their program. We had one school that we put on warning with intent to remove programmatic approval, and we actually paused enrollments for an entire semester to really address that public need. That is not something that the Florida board has, because the legislators removed that from them and deferred to accreditation only. And that is hugely problematic because that's in a national focus, not a state focus, et cetera. And accreditors have the ability to remove accreditation. They do not have an ability to remove program approval. And so schools are able to continue to operate without accreditation. So these are some of the things I want you guys to kind of keep in the back of your head to say, this is why this is happening in Florida. So based on those recently enacted laws that the legislator did, it handicapped the Board of Registered Nursing there. The Board of Registered Nursing then did not have any ability to really come in and address some of the issues that they were seeing was happening. The other issues was, of course, COVID coming in, and that was problematic. So this was a hot spot for these kind of predatory colleges to enter. And so the FBI received a walk-in complaint that was from an RN that said, hey, I heard about this and I'm ticked off about it, because they worked really hard to get through nursing school and become licensed and take care of patients in a safe manner. And they were told by a friend that all they had to do was go to this business, say they were interested in an LVN degree for $10,000 or an RN degree for $20,000. They would then pay, they would then receive a transcript. Those transcripts could be turned into any state, and that state would then review that transcript and qualify them to sit for the NCLEX. That's another thing that you guys just going to keep in the back of your head going through here is every board of nursing has the ability to authorize people to sit for the NCLEX. And that's what they apply to do. So they submit transcripts, that board reviews that transcript, and they're able to sit for the NCLEX. And that passing that NCLEX, then that board that gave them the authority to test is also the board that will grant the licensure to follow. And so with that, we have several states. Obviously, we know that every state has their own Nurse Practice Act. Every state has their own legislative oversight. Every state has their own rules for education, rules for licensure, rules for discipline, and so on. And so there's not a consistency. New York has no limit to how many times you can take the NCLEX. California also has no limit to how many times you can take the NCLEX. California, though, is not a compact state. And so keep that in mind too as we go through this. New York is a compact state. So with this, as this was discovered, they did an investigation. They found out that this was much bigger than they could have ever imagined. And so what they found were a handful of programs, Palm Beach, Siena, Sunshine, Sacred Heart, Quisqueya. Those were schools that were identified that says, wait, no, we're closing you down. They're offering fraudulent transcripts. What became problematic with that is some of those schools were also running a legitimate nursing program. So we were given lists that say these were legitimate grads and these are not legitimate grads. We were also told that the list of not legitimate grads was not all inclusive, that there may be more out there. Some of these schools, when they were closed by the authorities and forced to go out onto a teach out, issued thousands of fraudulent transcripts right before they were closed, to just kind of clear that out. So this became quite a big issue. So with that, the FBI, HHS, and D of I got together, had this investigation, coined it Operation Nightingale, and then notified the state boards of nursing. And they let us know what the impact was on our individual states. Our state happens to have two boards of nursing. We have the Board of Vocational Nursing, and we have the Board of Registered Nursing. And so our data was separate. And so we were made aware of how many currently licensed RNs potentially have fraudulent degrees and therefore fraudulent license within our state. We were minimally affected, thank goodness. The reasons we were minimally affected is, one, we're not a compact state. So there were other states, there's 39 states right now that are compact states. You get a license in one of them, you can work in all 39 states. You do not have to let the Board of Nursing know that you're, living in Ohio and working in Florida. Only Ohio knows that you're licensed, but you're working in Florida, and Florida has no idea that you're even there. The Board of Nursing doesn't, only the employer does. And so that allowed for thousands of licensees to be licensed in compact states and provide care in all of the 39 states that they can kind of move in and out of. Because we're not compact, that did not affect us. So those thousands of licensees that are in the compact states were not affected by us. Additionally, during COVID, there was a state out there that had a waiver put forward by the legislator. Again, remember that the legislative process is what sets the Nurse Practice Act for all states, right? And so our legislators addressed our COVID impact by giving waiver authority to the Department of Consumer Affairs. Director Kirkmeyer worked diligently with each board and bureau, getting input on what an impact a waiver would have and whether that would be a benefit and that would still uphold safety. Because of course, all of our boards and bureaus are about consumer protection and public safety. And with legal review, with input from us, there was some really smart waivers put into place that allowed for our nurses to be supported, our educators to be supported, and our students to progress and graduate throughout COVID. Although there has been an effect that COVID bubble will move through, as Joanne Spetz referenced. One of the states put a waiver into effect that said you don't have to take the NCLEX in order to be an RN. So that safety net that required the NCLEX prior to becoming RN was removed. Of course, these people were very well aware of that. And there was an influx of applicants to that state where they received an RN license without passing the NCLEX. And then they state hopped through the compact from state to state to state to try to drop that off of what their review is. Again, the difference between some of the states and our state is we look at state of licensure when we're looking at our endorsement applicants. Other states do not look at state of licensure. They look at, are you currently licensed in another state? Great, excellent, you can be a nurse here. And they endorse them in. And so we look at state of license. So anybody that came in through us, we would have looked at that state of license. We would have saw that it belonged to that state. And we potentially would have looked at that further to ensure that that was a person that actually passed the NCLEX. The other thing that our board requires that not all of the other states require, because again, different from state to state, is when you come into our state license through endorsement, not only do we look at your nursing license in another state, your state of licensure, your background check, we also require transcripts from every single school that you attended to show that you met our education requirements for nursing licensure in California. So if you did prerequisites at college and you took psych and soc, we need those transcripts as primary source data to show that you've taken psych and soc. When you graduate from a nursing program, we will also get your nursing program transcript, review that for accuracy to show that you've met our requirements for licensure as well. So based on our endorsement process, based on our not being a compact state, even though we have unlimited amounts to take the NCLEX, again, we were very minimally affected by this. And so as we are going through this process, we are made aware of schools that have been identified as part of Project Operation Nightingale. Schools that are identified are MedLife Institute, West Palm Beach, Sunshine Academy, Palm Beach School of Nursing, Quisqueya, Siena College of Health and Siena College of Health 2, Sacred Heart International Institute, Florida College of Health, Tampa, Florida, Sigma College, Florida, Corleen Home Health 2, West Palm Beach, Florida. You can also see that there are schools that were closed by the Florida Commission of Independent Education. MedLife was closed, Corleen was closed, Muriel School of Nursing was closed, Nursing Bridges Institute in Pensacola was closed, Palm Beach International was closed, Suncoast College was closed, and Technipro Institute was closed. With this, we're all working together as executive officers throughout all 50 states and 4 territories to really see what can be done. The nurses that were allowed in other states through endorsement, they're being investigated at their exam state. And our intent in our state is if we have nurses here that endorsed in, that made it through that process, into our state, that as soon as the exam state takes disciplinary action and proves that that exam was issued on a fraudulent transcript, that authorization was issued on a fraudulent transcript, that we would then take disciplinary action based on that. If we are the exam state, we are going to really look at our numbers. I mean, our applicants here, were they issued a authorization to test based on a fraudulent transcript? And if that was, we will then go through due process and remove that license. And then if that person endorsed into another state, they then would take probably take discipline actually based on ours. So it is a very large impact to this. What we've now learned, it's grown even further than what we originally thought the impact was throughout nursing. World Health Organization is involved, United Nations is involved, as well, obviously, our federal government with FBI. Those people that received fraudulent transcripts that took and passed the NCLEX have now utilized that to go back to receive advanced degrees. So the fear is now we may have independent practitioners out there as nurse practitioners, nurse midwives, etc., prescribing medications, doing all that kind of stuff, based on a fraudulent pre-licensure nursing license because the degree was not there. So NCSBN is the one that's working at the worldwide level. We're working at a national level. They are looking at a licensing reform process. We're waiting to hear what happens with that. They're looking at maybe being a repository for all future transcripts. They're looking at developing a course to teach all licensing staff from state to state on how to look at transcripts and look at them to see if they can identify them as being fraudulent. But they said that the risk is high and they have grave concerns around this. We are, right now, our board is reviewing all of the associate degree nursing programs out of Florida. That was the most noticed hit, and we have halted issuing any license to nurses that are applying to California where their pre-licensure nursing education came from an associate degree program in Florida as we do this review process. As we go through and clear programs, we will then issue those licenses. But there has been a temporary kind of pause as we relook at those programs, because as we're finding out is the school list is growing, unfortunately, because it is larger than what they originally thought. What we were given in our first report was just, 5 or 6 schools. And as you can see is in part of the materials that we are up to, I believe 10 schools, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 schools, it looks like. And so right there, we're continuing to show increased growth. And so we want to continue to do our due diligence as we're reviewing the processes and doing that. I'm going to turn this over to Shannon to really kind of talk about, and Christina, sorry, to talk about how, if the board has any questions and stuff on how we're trying to ensure that our licensing and enforcement is working together. Shannon did provide me some numbers, and I was going to share a few of those out. And so what we're doing right now is based on the schools that are identified through FBI, we are denying applications for licensure. And so what has happened right now is we have denied 110 applications for licensure right now. Those people can appeal. They can appeal. They can go through the process and see if that's something that they are able to. The burden of proof lies on the applicant, right? And if they're able to meet that burden of proof that they do deserve that license based on legitimate education, that will be reviewed and done. But as boards of nursing in other states started to crack down on issuing licenses, those applicants started to apply to states they hadn't applied before too. And we did see an influx into California on applications. And so we've been able to deny those based on that. And so that's really our focus, is to ensure that this doesn't continue and that we're able to not have licensees be licensed in California, working in California, that did not receive the education and qualify like everybody else. One of the other things I did want to put out to you is people have kind of reached out and said, well, how did they pass the NCLEX? Was the NCLEX compromised? NCSBN assures us that the NCLEX has not been compromised. The reason that these people were able to pass the NCLEX were because they were either an LVN prior to becoming an RN. So they have a wealth of knowledge and they know how to pass NCLEX because they take the NCLEX VN. And the other thought that we're actually able to confirm, it's not just a thought, is that some of these students went to a nursing program and failed out. There was a Jersey school that required a passage of a predictor in order to graduate, even if though you completed all of your nursing program. If you didn't pass that predictor, you didn't get to graduate, you didn't get your diploma. And so many people that completed an entire nursing program were not able to pass the predictor, and then they went and got this transcript, which allowed them to get licensed and pass an NCLEX, because they did actually receive nursing education. They just didn't pass a nursing program. So hopefully that kind of explains why the NCLEX was able to be passed by some of these people that participated in this fraudulent scheme. I will open it up to questions. Both Christina, Shannon, and myself are here for the board members.
Wow, thank you, Lori. I just have one question. The original numbers that were originally given to us for California, did those numbers include APRNs in those numbers, or were they RNs?
No APRNs were included in any of those numbers. The thing to kind of know about the APRN license, it's a little bit different than our pre-licensure or our RN license. RN license can be endorsed from state to state. And so if you're licensed in one state, you're able to, based on that license, go to another state to be an RN. APRN licenses are not endorsable. So they would have to apply based on their RN license here, and then apply for an additional certification as an APRN here. And that is how it is handled in most states. If you are licensed as an APRN in Florida or Connecticut, you're going to have to apply for licensure in Washington or Oregon or whatever. You cannot endorse based on your license from another state.
And the 110 that have been thus far denied, that can appeal the decision, those are just from Florida? I must have missed that part.
Yeah, all of these are Florida.
Okay.
Every single school right now that's been identified that we are aware of came from Florida.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, it may grow, it may go elsewhere. We just haven't got those reports yet back from
I think it
FBI.
might be helpful too to explain the denial process for the board so you understand. So we sent out a denial letter stating the code sections that of the potential violations in which we're denying the grounds for denial. And then they have 60 days to appeal that denial. So if they appeal within 60 days, then we send it off to the Attorney General's office, who in turn then provides us with a statement of issues that's filed and served to them. And then we will then go to hearing. So all of these cases will proceed to hearing, which may take 6 to 9 months based on Office of Administrative Hearings. And then the final outcome, once we have a final outcome, just like with any other case, that will get posted to nurses. So if it ends in denial and they don't appeal, the denial letter will also be posted to nurses, and it will be notified. So if somebody looks them up on the public side, you'll be able to see that they had a denial of application in California. So if they appeal or not appeal, both will be posted in some sort of fashion to nurses so that there is public awareness.
This is Betty. I just have a question about this. So some of these nurses had no kind of education at all. They just paid money and got a diploma. And some of them may have had some type of classes. Is that
Correct.
my understanding of this?
That is correct, Betty. Yes. It's what they kind of saw is that if one person was able to get a transcript and successfully become licensed in a state, they told their friends. And then their friends wanted to do that too. And so it really grew by word of mouth.
Thank you.
or recruitment, if you be 100% accurate of what that would be really called.
I have a question too. I mean, this seems like the plot of a really bad movie. But I
Yes.
guess the question that I have is, of the 100 plus, applicants that we have had, was it kind of an automatic denial if they came from a certain school, or was there a little bit more investigation into it? In other words, were any of these schools legitimate and they actually did take classes? They actually, did have a valid transcript, did pass a test, and are actually qualified nurses?
So yes to both. Yes,
Okay.
some of them were an automatic denial based on the school that was given, the school name that was given to us by FBI. There were schools names that were given to us by FBI that also had legitimate nursing students. Not all of them did. There were some schools that this is not legitimate, deny everybody. We did that. There were some schools that had legitimate nursing students. We were giving a list of those legitimate nursing students. And so those students, we would know that they were legitimate, that they did go to that school, that they were educated, and that their transcript is legit. We were also given a partial listing of people that received fraudulent transcripts. Some of these schools were so big in issuing these transcripts that they stopped keeping record. And so there are many more that received a fraudulent transcript than what they have documented, which is why we have to do a really thorough investigation on anybody that comes in for licensure that was not on the listing provided to us of legitimate students. So we do cross-reference on the listing to see if there are legitimate students that were told to us by the school, and we would then process them appropriately. But the ones that were not on that list, we do have to deny and do an investigation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Tricia, just for reference, I out of everything, and just to update you on the numbers too, as of today, we've actually mailed out 127 denials. But when I cross-check against those lists, I've only found one that was legitimate out of that bulk of those. And just so you know, what I'm doing each week, kind of diligently trying to keep up with these is, one, I'm cross-checking those lists every time I get an applicant that comes over from one of those schools. I'm also, National Council has created a couple reports that now I can run on a weekly basis, and they're all based on any person that has been flagged by nurses as being under that FBI investigation. So I can run those reports each week to see if there's been any added to our list of our California licensees.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the board? Thank you, Lori, for your report. BRN moderator, can we open it up for public comments?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Elissa Brown would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
You hear me?
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Oh, good, thank you. Thank you for this report. It's rather appalling. I just think about all the ethics or unethics of it. And it's been going on for like 6 or 7 years, is my understanding. So it's just, I think what's so appalling to me is that the nurses who were involved in this, the students, did they have any idea, what they were getting into? It's really a daunting task, I think, and to review it all and to make the denial. So thank you for doing this. Thanks for alerting everyone to this. Good luck.
Thank you. Our understanding is that every student that participated in this, we were told, or was absolutely aware of it. They knew that they were in at minimum, a fast track program that they took part-time, essentially weekends only, and they did not have clinical experiences. They did labs, etc. So we were told that at minimum, they were at least complacent. And so they were absolutely aware of what was going on, is what we were led to believe.
Right, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Jean Wilkes would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Oh, Jean Wilkes, if you're on a cell phone, let me know what your number is. Sorry. ADW would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
There was a comment, BRN moderator, maybe they're not coming on, so I will answer that comment from ADW. The comment says, how many were found in the state of California for fraudulent licensure? We have over 500,000 licensees in our state, and we were, again, minimally affected. We're looking at those numbers right now. At first glance, we are looking at under 40. So that is something that is quite a testament to our processes here in California and the lack of draw that we have by not being a compact state. And so when you look at that, we're looking at right now under 40 total licensees within our state of greater than 500,000. I think that that's really important to understand when I say that we were minimally affected. Now, of those that are were identified, and of course, this is an ongoing investigation, so these numbers could absolutely increase. We just don't know yet because everything is ongoing. Of those that were identified, when we do an investigation, we will find out if they were licensed appropriately. There have been some reports from other boards of nursing and from the FBI that there are some people that were involved in this initially and then felt bad, stopped their involvement, and went back to a legitimate nursing school. Did go to a legitimate nursing school and receive licensure based on a legitimate education and transcript. So even of those 40-ish that we are looking at right now that have been identified, there may be some of those that were licensed completely appropriate within our state. We have to complete the investigation.
Thank you. And Jean Wilkes would like to make a comment.
Are they able to unmute on their cell phone? Is it the star something, Mark? What's the direction?
Star 6, star 7. I thought it was in the directions. I can't see because my comments are the, it's texting over the comments.
Yeah. So it'd be call-in user number 3.
Yes.
If you were able to unmute.
There we go.
Perfect.
Nope. They did it, but then they went back. 1 second. Star 6 or star 9?
There we go.
Hello, this
There
is
you
Gene
go.
Wilkes. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
We are.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My name is Gene Wilkes. I am a Florida resident, and I did attend a college here in the state of Florida for my nursing degree. I just want to say I think it is appalling that these individuals are falsifying things, and we appreciate you guys investigating them. With that being said, I don't think that we should group all students who graduated from a particular school, especially one who's not even listed on the Project Nightingale investigation, into one category. I think we should take into consideration the totality of the circumstances in reference to, did the individual pass the NCLEX on the first try? Did the individual have a college degree before that? Are they licensed in multiple states? Have they been issued a license in the state of California previously? I think there's more factors that need to go into the full investigation. And I also think that according to the article that's on the board's website, that, you know, it's being investigated in a diligent and expeditious manner. I would really question if it's been done in an expeditious manner, being the time frame that it's already taken. And also it says that it's being investigated in accordance with due process authority. And I think if you take a look at due process authority, I don't think it's being handled, because individuals are being denied strictly on a basis that they went to thus and such school, and like I said before, grouped together and not taken on a case-by-case basis. My particular case, I'm being told that I'm deficient on an item that's on the transcript that the board already has, but that since my college is supposedly under investigation, they won't even help me address that deficiency so that it can be processed in a timely manner once the investigations are complete. And I just ask the board to empathize and put themselves in our situation, to where if your ability to earn an income in a specific area was taken away from you, how it would make you feel, and you know that you would want it processed and completed in a timely manner.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. So I'll address just a few items there, just so our board can hear and the person making public comment. So board moderator, can you mute? Thank you. And so with that, because this is an ongoing investigation, we are aware of many other schools that are being looked into in Florida right now that are being investigated by the FBI. That list has not come out to us because it's an ongoing investigation. When FBI releases additional schools, we will then issue denial letters based on the FBI investigation. When the FBI, so there are schools that are potentially held right now that we are reviewing on our end to do our due diligence, that may end up receiving blanket denials based on the current FBI ongoing investigation. So we have to be 100% aware of that. In the meetings with executive officers, because there was a trend that this was more prevalent in associate degree nursing programs in the state of Florida, we are taking a look at each one of the associate degree nursing programs in Florida. There's about 200 of them. And so we are going through each and every one to look at them. We're making contact with those schools. We're looking at ownership. We're looking at degree granting, financial aid. I mean, we're going to be looking at so much in alignment with what other states are doing. And so that is something to really take into consideration. And yes, we do have applicants right now that are in a holding pattern as we do our due diligence to review those programs. Each one of the programs that get a school code, I believe, is what's referred to as, Christina, please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, goes through a review process at our board. And we look at the school's curriculum, we look at the clinicals, theory, the concurrency, because they have to meet the same education standards that our California grads do in order to be licensed in California. And so it is a process. And if these schools are deemed appropriate, their students, if they completed the programs with that school, and they've met all the other licensing requirements, they will be licensed. But based on the FBI investigation, they're investigating by school. If the school is deemed fraudulent, we will deny license to all of those people that attended that school because it's a fraudulent school. Again, we're waiting for additional feedback from FBI before we can move forward with that, but we are definitely simultaneously looking at each ADN program in Florida at this point. We did hear from a school that is not an ADN program, to just put this on the radar as well. A university that offers a bachelor's degree in Florida noticed that they were getting NCLEX pass rate data, failures and stuff that affects their standing and their accreditation. So they started looking at those student names, and they looked at those student names and said, those aren't our students. And so that school has preemptively reached out to NCSBN as well as every single board of nursing and saying, we do not have a June graduating cohort. And these boards, our board included, have multiple applicants coming from that university saying that they graduated in June. So separate from Operation Nightingale, there is a separate fraudulent activity out there of another Florida school that is a university BSN level, that has graduates, that has people claiming to graduate from their school with a fraudulent transcript. And so that is something that our licensing staff and our enforcement staff is aware of too, that we're also managing simultaneous to this. That school is not a fraudulent school, but that school said that they have found on data that they've received that there are students claiming to go to that school that never attended that school that are applying for licensure in multiple states based on a June graduation. Okay, were there any further public comments, board moderator?
No, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right. At this time, I would like to take.
This is information only, so no motion is needed. I want to make sure the board members have any additional comments, and then yes, then we'll go to you, Dolores, to take a lunch break.
Yes. Any other questions or comments from the board? All right. All right, so why don't we break for lunch?
Back at 1? That's about a little over 45 minutes.
Yeah, 1 o'clock's fine.
Sounds great, guys. See you guys back at 1.
Thank you.
Enjoy. We will go ahead and thank you. We'll go ahead and take attendance for roll call attendance for a quorum. Board President?
Yes. Okay, so we'll take attendance for quorum and then we'll continue on with the meeting. Dolores Trujillo is president, Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan's here.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods present.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita's here.
Patricia Nguyen.
Tricia's here.
David Lawler.
David Lawler's here.
Vicki Granowitz.
Vicki's here.
All right. Looks like we have established a quorum. Before we go into item 7.0, this is the report of the Nursing Practice Committee chaired by Elizabeth Woods. I would like to take this opportunity to announce that this is Betty Woods' last meeting. As some of you may have heard in the beginning of the meeting. She has served 2 terms with the board, and we will miss her insight, her knowledge, and her wisdom. Betty, we wish you a peaceful and happy retirement. And Betty, should you miss us, we will always welcome your input at our board meetings and public comment. Thank you, Betty, for your service to the board.
Thank you, Betty.
All right, moving on. Moving on to 7.0, report of the Nursing Practice Committee. Betty? You're on mute, Betty.
Sorry.
That's okay.
This is the advisory committee updates, and Lori, you'll be doing these. Is that correct?
Yes, I will. Thank you. So I'll just go in order and I'll give an update on all 5 of the advisory committees as a total, and then it is information only, so no motion is needed. And so after the update is completed, I will allow for any board conversation, any questions, and then we'll go out to public comment. So the first one is the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee. The last time that the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee met was in March. As part of that meeting, we did just do an update on the implementation of AB 890. We did have our 103 applications go live in January. We're continuing to work out the kinks on that brand new application. And as you heard in my executive officer report, a lot of meetings to really meet with stakeholders to kind of explain what a 103 is, what they can do, what they cannot do, what the next steps are for the 104. I've even met with legislative staff and CANP because they were really wanting to know why the legacy and retired certifications don't meet the qualifications. So we provided some guidance and update on that as well. And then part of that came from the discussion in the NPAC meeting, agenda item 7.0, which was discussion regarding recognition of legacy and specialty certifications. As part of the law that AB 890 enacted, they required that the Office of Examination, OPES, Professional Examination Services, review current exam to show that it meets the qualifications for independent practice. Our legacy and retired certifications have no current exam. So there was no exam to be reviewed. So therefore those legacy and retired certifications could not be included in the independent practice. Additionally, it also requires them to do ongoing and periodic exam reviews, which means that the certification must continue in order to ensure that people entering the profession continue to meet the minimum standards for independent practice. Then there was discussion around specialty certifications. The way that specialty certifications are developed is they're not developed at a national model. They're developed in various ways. There's various ways to attain them, not always through testing. And the specialty certifications are just a notice that says I have a higher amount of knowledge in a particular subject that is incorporated in the national certification of the population focus. And so through the APRN consensus model that our board adopted in alignment with all the rest of the states is that we have no regulatory authority over specialty certifications, only the national population focus based. And that's where licensing occurs. And so we are in alignment with that. A specialty certification means nothing without a national certification and a population focus, and therefore we're continuing to license at that level. The other item that was discussed was just in-depth conversation about the board making, the NPAC making input into our disciplinary guidelines so that we can address the specific requirements for disciplinary measures now that there is an independent practice component. And so that's where we will see some changes and updates happening there through those advisories. Is there any question on the nurse practice committee before I move on to the nurse midwife committee? Okay, the nurse midwife committee was held on the same day in March. Very similar topics for discussion. In fact, that we did also discuss with them what the guidance and stuff would be when the nurse midwife board would make considerations on discipline. A lot of legal conversation ensued on what our board's role is, what their role would be as an advisory, and what we can really do legally. Even if a law said that they should have this type of input, there are other laws that conflict with that we have to manage. And so Reza led the majority of that discussion, and there was a lot of questions and clarification provided. And again, they will go through looking at data and making recommendations to update our disciplinary guidelines. The other thing that was requested by the chair of that committee was to develop subcommittees, and so that they can do some focused work outside of their nurse midwife advisory committees. So they did make a public engagement and website committee. They made a nurse midwifery scope of practice committee, a regulations committee, and a nurse midwifery education committee. Those four subcommittees will work 2 people outside of the scheduled meeting. And then when we have the 2 scheduled meetings, they will report out that work to the advisory committee, receive recommendations, receive comments and input, and decide whether or not there are additional guidance that will be set forth to our board for consideration. So excited to see what those 2 committees do. We did start the board voted in, I believe, fall of last year to not have a advanced practice nursing advisory committee that looks at all 4 because of the limits to the 2 committees that we just talked about in subcommittee in statute. So in place of the APRN committee, we now have 4 distinct advisory committees. So that also meant that the board voted to create a clinical nurse specialist advisory committee, as well as a certified registered nurse anesthetist advisory committee. That vote went into effect last fall. In the February board meeting, you guys voted on a charter, and then also voted that I would appoint the members to the committee, as long as the admin committee made up of the president and vice president of our board agreed. And so that has happened. We did go out and seek applicants. We did get a good response for both CNS and CRNA. And what we did not receive is public members. So if there is anybody out there that wants to participate as a public member in the Clinical Nurse Specialist Advisory Committee or the Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist Advisory Committee, we would love for you to apply. That application is still on our website, and it will be up and open until we can fill that position. So those positions, sorry. So we need 1 public member for CNSAC and 1 public member for CRNAAC. So we will gladly welcome even a single application. We received 0 applications in the public members. So with that, we did send out appointment letters to the 4 clinical nurse specialists and the 4 nurse anesthetists that will be joining us. Alyssa Brown, she was part of the APRN committee. She came over to us into the new committee based on your guys' vote to continue. She's a CNS. She is from the South, and she does direct practice in large academic centers, as well as in large and academic centers, as well in other healthcare centers. Her CNS certification is in psych mental health. So the 3 other people I went through and chose, CNSs currently have 3 recognized national certifications, 1 in neonatal, 1 in pediatric, and 1 in adult gero. So there was a single neonatal applicant that applied. And so Shannon Buckley received that. She is representative of the North, and she is part of a large practice setting. Additionally, we looked at adult Gero, and there is one adult Gero applicant that applied, and that was Carrie Krogan. She is from the central area, and she is in large practice settings. So just in those, we did end up getting South, North, and Central state coverage. And we did end up with neonatal and adult Gero. So there was 2 that came in with a pediatric designation. We looked at where they were located. We look at what settings they did. We read their interest into why they wanted to come. And Jessica Lightcap was chosen. And those will be our clinical nurse specialists that will make up the CNS AC Advisory Committee. And our board's admin committee signed off on those choices. So they have been noticed as of yesterday that they will be joining our advisory committee and that will start up as soon as we can secure a public member. I will then go on to the Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist Advisory Committee. And it kind of went through the same similar process on screening, getting applicants in. Did they complete their application? Was it thorough? Was it extensive? And really, did it meet the needs of what an advisory committee would do? So based on their write-up and such. So 2 CRNAs came over from the APRN committee. So Sandra Bordy will be joining us as a representative for CRNA. She is from the South region, and Karen Karp will be coming over again from the APRN committee to CRNA from the North. And so we had North and South represented. We had large and academic settings represented as well. And so we needed to find a central representative to meet all of those. And then what we were missing were kind of smaller settings to be represented and pain management clinics. And so with that, we looked at the applicants and kind of narrowed it down. We chose Joseph Martin from the Central. So we ended up with a North, South, and a Central. Comes from large, small, and academic. And then the other choice was Samantha Pilikowski. And she was one of the 2 that were pain management clinic. And so based on just kind of narrowing down and looking at various things, she was chosen for that role. So I am excited that we will be able to move forward on getting these committees formed, that we will be able to address some of the outstanding needs of both the CNS and the CRNA, and that we'll have a full complement of advanced practice advisory committees to make recommendations to our board and seek guidance from. And so I turned that over to our admin committee. Sorry about that. And they agreed with the recommendation. And again, they have been noticed as well that they will be joining our group. And so then moving on to the NEWAC committee update, just want to make sure there's no further questions on CRNA or CNS before I move on to that one. I did do those kind of together. So I just wanted to make sure that the board had an opportunity. Okay. So the NEWAC committee met in March as well. March 30th was their committee. They did get an update for me on various updates to education, let them know that you guys were starting to do a workforce kind of plan and that they're seeking some input from them. We did go through and get some recommendations from them on further subcommittees. They had 2 subcommittees that they had chosen previously, which was actually one of the subcommittees that Joanne Spetz was on. And that was looking at the annual surveys and the biannual surveys. And then the other one was a statutory requirement of looking at simulation. So with this, they established additional subcommittees that they will be branching out and really kind of helping us get some expert opinion, and not opinions, but expert information recommended up to the board on how to kind of manage some of the issues that both nursing, education, and workforce are facing. Some were focused on, of course, retention of workforce, very much like Joanne had mentioned, and others were focused on the nursing pipeline through our schools. And so very excited to see how that comes to fruition. And then Joanne was able to receive some updates, and then ultimately a decision was made to do a interested parties meeting. The chair had some strong feedback received from various parties saying they really just want to be able to come and talk. They want to let us know what's going on, what their needs are, what the opinions of these stakeholders are, and allow for some interactive conversation between the advisory committee members. And so that is scheduled for June 15th. We are working with them right now to get an agenda out, and it will be a fairly long meeting, I'm sure, as we hear from the various stakeholders that have a lot of input and concern with education, with workforce, et cetera. So that's the last of my advisory committee update. I want to pause and give the board any ability to ask questions on Nursing Education Workforce Advisory Committee before we go out to public comment.
That's a lot of work, Lori. Thank you very much for that update.
Thank you. Any comments from the board? And seeing no comments from the board, board moderator, can you please open up to public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comment. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board EO Melby, there are no public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window? Or is this Board President Trujillo? Would you like me to close this? Comment?
Either one. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 7.2. Discussion and possible action, removal of method 3 equivalency for licensure for qualifying APRN applications. Lori? Lori, I think you're on mute.
I am on mute, and I was just talking away. So with our strategic plan, we talked about kind of reviewing the APRNs and looking at what we can do to just streamline that and make sure that we are truly doing the service of licensing and public protection and everything that we can. And so when we as we talked with Mary, opened the Pandora's box of what is APRN. The staff had a lot to contribute and to share out on what they think would have some of the biggest impacts. And so the nurse anesthetist is able to be licensed in California through one method only, and that is through national certification. That is the only way that they can come in and be licensed here. Then you look at the clinical nurse specialist that can be licensed through, and then, sorry, the other three are clinical nurse specialist, nurse practitioner, nurse midwife, and they can come into California 3 different ways right now. The first way is called Method 1, and that is by completing a California board approved program for either clinical nurse specialist, nurse practitioner, or nurse midwife. The second way, which is Method 2, they come in through a national certification. So then they get their national certification that's recognized for licensure, and then they come in and apply. Method 3 is an equivalency process. This equivalency process requires a tremendous amount of documentation, a tremendous amount of work on the applicant's part, a tremendous amount of work on the licensing staff and our nursing education consultants to review to see, did they meet the same rigor as if they were coming from our California approved nurse practitioner programs? And do they meet the same as if they were having a national certification? I had our licensing staff, because their recommendation was to remove the equivalency method. They're saying it really is a disservice to have it out there. And so I said, pull data, let's have a conversation about it. Each one of these applicants pay about, I think, $500 to have their application reviewed in hopes that they can become an advanced practice RN in our state through this equivalency method. I had the data pulled, and I can tell you that in the last 5 years, we have not approved a single person on the equivalency method. So we are collecting the money, we have an application out there, and we have no way to currently approve them because there is no way that they can meet the rigors that are set forth by our board by coming in through equivalency. So then I looked at that data, and it said that nurse practitioners and clinical nurse specialists have not been able to come on in equivalency since 2018. Well, then what changed in 2018? Regulations changed, laws changed, and it made it more difficult for a person that's not educated with national certification to claim the title of advanced practice RN. Understanding that advanced practice RN has been going through this kind of metamorphosis for a while. As early as 2008, that's when a degree was finally required. So nurse practitioners prior to 2008 were not required to have a master's degree. So now they are required to have a master's degree. And eventually, in 2025, it looks like nurse practitioners will be required to have a doctoral degree. And so we'll have to look at some of those. So those are some of the changes that are happening nationally as well as stateside that make it impossible for them to come in on equivalency method. The last one is the nurse midwife, and they have not been approved to come in for 13 years. I think the last person that has been able to come in and work as a midwife in California on equivalency was 2010. And so I'm asking, based on recommendations from our licensing staff and APRN, to see if our board would consider removing the equivalency method for licensure for our advanced practice RNs, clinical nurse specialists, nurse anesthetist, nurse anesthetist doesn't have it already, nurse practitioner, and nurse midwife. Any questions from our board?
So Lori, does this require a motion to remove the method?
It does, yes. You would have to approve or not approve the removal of method 3 equivalency for licensures for the qualifying APRN apps. And those are CNS, nurse midwife and nurse practitioner.
Great. Any questions or comments from the board? Okay.
I think I have a comment. You know, if we are not doing this and we have an application process and we're collecting fees and we're not granting them, I'm all in favor of eliminating it, because I think we're just, you know, it feels like bait and switch. It just feels like bad faith.
It did to me as well when I pulled the numbers and asked that information.
This is Betty. I think this came to pass a long time ago when we didn't have nurse practitioners educated on the master's level, or so I think it's irrelevant right now. I think it should just be removed. There's no reason to have it at this point.
Correct.
I'll
I
make a
agree.
motion to do that.
So you said you were making a motion, is that correct, Betty?
Yes, to remove it.
Thank you.
I will second it.
Okay, board moderator, we can go out to public comment.
We will be opening it for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Alyssa Brown would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
No, thank you. I was there when we first did this with the first CNS Advisory Committee, and Betty, you're right. One of the issues was how to not disenfranchise some of our APRN colleagues who were already in APRN positions, and they were worried about that, particularly the NPs, that it would mean that they would all have to have graduate degrees, and that came to pass eventually. So at this point, I would agree that it's very costly for people to do and for the board in terms of time and money. So I would agree that it's not needed at this point. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita, yes.
David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
And Vicki Granowitz.
Vicki Granowitz, yes.
All right, motion carries. On to 7.3, discussion and possible action accepting only electronic submissions of transcripts.
I made sure to unmute this time before speaking. So as we talked about earlier, Operation Nightingale, and really the impact of that in looking at our licensing process. And so when meeting with licensing, meeting with NCSBN, and I also met with Department of Consumer Affairs to really look at the impact of some of the things that we can do to decrease fraudulent transcripts coming into our board. And one of the discussion items were to receive only electronic transcripts from our United States endorsement apps. As you guys are very much aware, our California in-state grads already receive only through the electronic portal. We do not receive any paper transcripts from any of our California programs. It is all done through that portal by the board-approved director of nursing or assistant director of nursing that is on our records for California programs. So now we're looking at the U.S. endorsement process. We've yet to look at the international grads because I think there are some barriers and stuff in place for that to go completely electronic. So this would be only the U.S. international. US endorsement grads. And what the request is to move to only receiving electronic transcripts from these schools. Right now, we are able to receive them paper from the schools in sealed envelopes and stuff like that. But as we learned in Operation Nightingale, paper transcripts can be frauded very easily and sent out very easily. You can get one rogue employee at a school that is legit that could be using the transcript paper and the seal and issuing fraudulent transcripts. They would be from the school because that person works for there, and we would receive them and we would know no different. So by going to an electronic method, that school contracts with an electronic transcript distributor. It has to be done and transmitted to them electronically. There's a trail now at this point. So it shows that it came from that school, who it came from, how it got onto their system, and then that is then transmitted to us. We do have 2 contracts with the largest electronic transcript companies in the nation. That's Parchment and Clearinghouse. And so we are asking the board to consider whether or not they would support us in accepting only electronic submission of transcripts going forward for our United States endorsement applicants only. At this particular moment, I will need to look further in international before we make a motion on any of that. And I'll bring that back forth in front of the board if that's something we can move to really, one, streamline the process, stop receiving paper applicants. Those paper applicants no longer have to go through the mailroom, no longer have to be divided and sent up and scanned in and named and attached. We can all get it done electronically. So it does do a process improvement, a streamlined process for us as well, and addresses any fraudulent activity. And so this would be for US endorsement, US exam apps, not international and not California grad. Hopefully that makes sense.
Considering all of the information that we got this morning from what's happened in Florida, I think that this is really the best, at least a better method of trying to see that we get accurate information that we can validate this streamlined process. So I certainly would support it.
I agree. Does someone want to make a motion to accept electronic transcripts for US endorsement and US exam apps and no longer accept paper?
I'll make it.
Thank you, Betty. So Betty has made the motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second, David.
Thank you, David. We can go out to public comment, board moderator.
We will be opening for public comment now. I will be activating the question and answer feature. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember you will have 2 minutes to make your comment. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Alyssa Brown would like to make a comment. 1 second, please.
Thank you. It sounds reasonable. I have only one concern, and that is about people who come from a school that may have closed. I can tell you from way back when that I was able to get it because the university still existed, but it took a long time. And if we would at least allow people that time without charging them more money while they're waiting, then it's fine with me. I understand why we need the electronic, but I know that that can be a problem. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, we'll take it to a vote.
Real quick before the vote, Dolores, I would like to give that information on some of the the issue that Alyssa raised. You can get transcripts from closed schools, not from the school itself, but you do have to go to the U.S. Department of Education. You would contact them, you would request that, if it was, at the federal level. Each state typically has a overarching kind of approving body as well that would receive those transcripts from closed academic institutions. Example here in California, if there is a closed private institution, you would get those transcripts from the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education, BPPE. And so we did have a school that closed, it was Brightwood. Their transcripts, you can receive anything that came from there through BPPE. And so there are ways to get those from other agencies, and they are still able to be received electronically. So I just wanted to kind of put your mind at ease that that is something that we did look into, and there is a way to do that.
All right. Take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan, yes.
Elizabeth Woods.
Woods, yes.
Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita, yes.
Patricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
Vicky Granowitz.
Vicky Granowitz, yes.
All right, motion carries.